Amwell Planning Board meeting of June 17th, 2024. Stand for the flag salute, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, this is a regularly scheduled meeting pursuant with a resolution adopted on January 16, 2024, with a meeting notice sent to the Hunterdon County Democrat on January 18, 2024. A copy of the agenda for this meeting was posted to the Township website on June 13, 2024, posted on the bulletin board, and filed in the clerk's office on June 14, 2024. Chairperson Emily Edweiler.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Matthew Kohat.
Here.
Mayor Dante DePiero.
Here.
Mr. Jamal Kadri.
Here.
Mr. Al Nardi.
Here.
Mr. Richard Catanacci.
Here.
Miss Mary Van Horn.
Here.
Miss Candace Wiggum.
Here.
Mr. Michael McGovern.
Here.
Miss Maria Teresi.
Here.
Miss Alexis Smith.
Here.
Mr. Robert O'Brien.
Here.
Mr. Michael Davis.
Here.
And let the record show Kristen Atanasia is here as well.
And we'll get started. First thing, just a quick review of the agenda. Two things to note. One is the Craig and Janine Mattis case is actually being continued, so it's on the agenda for continuance, but there will be no substantive matters heard on that one. And secondly, just for the record, the application RJM Landscaping, the actual proper legal name is Robert Monahan. So RJM Landscaping is the business name, and I just was noticing that. And did I say the name right? Monahan? Monahan. Okay. Thank you. Okay. First up on the agenda, citizens' privilege. May I have a motion? Open to the public.
So moved. Second.
Open to the public. Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Open to the public for items not on the agenda. Please state your name for the record.
I didn't see it on the agenda, although there's an invoice for it. My name is John Allen. I'm at 53 Manners Road. And many of you know me, some of you don't, and you're lucky. I'm the township historian.
Okay.
And I'm realizing there's a lot of stuff that I should be involved in that I'm not yet. And one of those things is the UAW location for 20 John Ringo Road. I did some work for Rick Wolf when he was mayor, and that was remote. That was when we were locked down. So there wasn't a whole heck of a lot I could do. If you haven't been out there, don't go now. You won't be able to see what I'm about to talk to you about because it's overgrown. There is a foundation, and I think they refer to it as a foundation on, I think it's figure 3A in their package. It actually is, it's unknown, but it's stone. It doesn't have any cement, so I believe it predates the house, which would be, the house is 1853, 54. But the quote-unquote foundation certainly predates that. I've got pictures for anyone that I took in March 2023 where you can see what it is. And I'll pass that around if you don't mind. And I'm going to ask if that foundation really has to be removed. It's something that is inside the building setback line. It's outside anything that they want to do with it. And we don't know what it is. Once it's gone, we ain't gonna learn what it is. And by virtue of the fact that it's located in what is now lot 18.02, which has the house, and I thank them for for keeping that. That is a contributing member to the historical district, which is, it's important to note. This feature is within block 18.02. Now, I don't know what they're planning to do exactly with 1802. 1801 is the big lot
Where
that
the,
we'll be developing.
Yep.
02 has the house, the shed, which is gonna be kept. Why, I don't know. A foundation, which predates the house as far as I'm concerned, which is going to be removed. And yet it doesn't really enter the equation for them. They're not needing to remove that. So all I'd like to do is make you alert to the fact that there is this foundation. And, you know, if you look at it, you say, yeah, it's all rocks, and it's all local rock. So it predates the railroad, because once the railroad is in, you have a source of limestone in the north end of the county, you make cement. There's no cement in that. And that second picture, you'll see a chimney cap. And the chimney cap is identical to the 3 that are currently on the house. My guess, and it's only a guess, is it was a smokehouse. Somebody had mentioned that maybe it was an ice house. There's not a source of water there. Why would you put a chimney on an ice house? Yeah, I just want to ask if someone in a position of responsibility, such as yourself, if someone would contact UAW and ask if they really need to remove that. And I'm not looking to stand in their way, but I want you to know that's an interesting piece of the property that is unnecessary to be taken down, I think. Thank you.
So if you want, Mr. Allen, I can give you a quick response. So we could write a letter if the board is so inclined to UAW, but they do have to come back for final site plan approval. So nothing's being moved until they come back for final site plan approval, so that's something that can be
And I'm glad of
raised.
that.
So nothing, they can't, remove anything until the board gives their final okay with that. But if the board's inclined, we'd be happy to write a letter. It's something, if you're up to it, I can do it on behalf of the board to let them know of your concerns and the public's concerns.
Yeah, Mr. Allen, I had a question for you. What would you foresee the interest? This is intrinsically interesting. I grant you that, and I'm curious where you see this potentially going. I don't know, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, what this foundation might provide for the town as far as its intrinsic historic value.
Well, one thing that could be provided is once it is no longer overgrown, i.e. you're looking at November, December, I'd love to get permission to go out there and look for chars. Are the interiors charred? You'll notice on the east side of that structure, there's a pile of debris. Does the debris contain bones? Does it contain charcoal? Is there anything in that gives me any indication of what it is? Now, in terms of what could be, I can't tell you that it belonged to John Ringo or anybody like that. But I can tell you that Amos Hart, who was a doctor in the 1870s in Ringo's, did have his office in the house. So I'm very happy that stayed there. It's missing the front wall, and that remains a curiosity to me. Why it's a 3-sided structure. I thought, okay, at first I thought it was a wagon house. Shows what I know. But yeah, the only negative could be if it's not posted, keep away, and it stands there. It will be like the wall off Rocktown Road. It needs a sign to say, don't go climbing on here if you value your feet. So, but in terms of positives, it's just part of our history, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Thank you.
May I keep these?
Would you like digital copies of those?
That would be wonderful.
If I can get your email later, even if you just write it on the back of that.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public?
I'm sorry?
No, I'm just asking if there's anyone else. Sorry.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Going once, twice?
Emily,
Yes.
I can put John in direct contact with the person who is handling that property through UAW, and John can speak directly with that person about the foundation, if that would be helpful.
I think that would be Mr. Wolf. Just let the record reflect that Mr. Wolf asked, that said he would put John in contact with the right person at UAW.
I'll give you a contact.
Thank you, Rick.
Talk to him directly. Okay, thanks. Then we don't have to spend money on a letter.
Understood, I get it.
I was gonna write the letter and let her look at it.
Whatever
It'd
works.
be easier if John just talked.
Yeah.
I agree.
Trying to be good neighbors.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sure
I
it's
agree.
an effort on your
Just,
part, so-
yeah. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Rick.
Sure.
Close to the public. Anyone have any objections for closing to the public? No. Presentation of minutes. Okay, so April 15th, 2024, if I recall, that's the meeting with the UAW application, so I recuse myself from part of that. So I will not be voting on that. Let's make sure we know who needs to vote on that. Does everyone know who needs to vote on April 15th? You all ready?
Can I just say one thing real quick?
Yes.
My name is spelled wrong.
Okay, so that needs to get fixed.
Yeah.
I will fix that. Thank you.
Good one. Yeah, that was.
Emily, there are some, I wasn't in for the discussion, I was recused on the UAW piece, but I do have some comments on other portions of the minutes.
Let's then, unless anyone has an objection, I'd just like to hold the minutes to the next month, make those corrections. This is an important correction, and then we'll vote on them next month, and unless anyone has an objection. Okay, so we'll hold those to next month. Thank you. May 20th, 2024, I was not here. Does everyone know who's voting on that one? Everyone have a chance to review the minutes? Okay. May I have a motion?
I move we accept the minutes.
Okay.
Second?
Everyone in favor of accepting minutes for May 20th, 2024?
Aye.
Okay. Good. Resolutions for approval, we have none. Unfinished business, Jane and Janine Mattis. This matter is being continued until
Next meeting, which is, Kristen, what's the date of next meeting?
July 15th.
So it's being continued to the date certain of July 15th, so no further notice will be provided for the Mattis application.
And just a minor note, at the request of the mayor, if we know that in advance, we will try to put that on the agenda that something's being continued. I thought that was a good suggestion. Having been on the other side of that one, I was like, yeah, I appreciate that one. Okay. New business. We have Robert Monahan.
Good evening, my name is
Hold on,
Nicole.
hold on. So, since we're gonna reconstitute as a zoning board, so our committee members will now sit down, and we'll be a board of 7. So while we do have some alternates here, you're able to listen, ask questions, but won't be able to vote. You can stay, yep, listen, ask questions, but not be able to vote.
You got some room now.
Yep,
Candace.
so you can stay, it's just, township committee has to sit down for zoning board, so.
Good evening, I'm just taking one more
Just one
moment
moment,
to
yep.
organize
Yep,
myself.
take your time.
Thank
So we're
you.
now meeting as a zoning board, and this is an appeal of a zoning officer decision as well as a certificate of nonconformity. If those two are not approved, right, then we will move to the use variance. So just so everyone knows the order of which we'll be handling these.
Yep.
And take your time.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that. Okay, so I'm Nicole Voigt of Voigt Law out of Lambertville. I'm also your neighbor, I live next door in Delaware Township. Can you hear me all right?
Not back here.
You might, you might need to hit that.
Is that better? Okay, my name is Nicole Voigt of Voigt Law out of Lambertville, and I'm here this evening on behalf of Mr. Robert Monahan. This matter pertains briefly to an application that has been filed. First, actually, an appeal was filed on October of 2023 as a result of a rescission of a zoning permit that had been granted to Mr. Monahan. So that zoning permit was rescinded and simultaneously a zoning violation issued. So that was appealed in October of 2023. We then had some review letters and correspondence with the township. And then Mr. Monahan elected in January of 2024, actually in April of 2024, to submit 2 applications to you. First, for certification of a lawfully permitted pre-existing use, and then in the alternative, if that were not granted, a use variance. This property pertains to 35 Rosemont Ringos Road, Route 604. It is Block 5, Lot 1.10, and that is in the Amwell Valley Agricultural District. And again, the requests that have been noticed include the appeal pursuant to NJSA 4055D70A. Also, a request for a certification of an existing landscaping business as a lawfully permitted pre-existing non-conforming use. And then a request for approval of a use variance. And I'll ask that you take note that the notice that was published and mailed also included permission to grant such variances, exceptions, or other relief as may be deemed required by the board. Tonight, on behalf of this application, we will have Mr. Monahan as fact witness, and he is the owner of RJM Landscaping. He also occupies this property as a residence as well as operates RJM Landscaping business there. And with us also is his planner, Mr. John Tykina, of All Things Planning and Development. Notice was made, an affidavit of service was submitted, and that has been deemed acceptable. And in terms of completeness, what has happened is the appeal and the request for certification of the existing landscape business as a lawfully permitted pre-existing non-conforming use are deemed complete. With respect to the use variance, the checklist includes requests for certain plan details, the many different details that you would expect to see on a plan. Waivers have been requested of those application requirements with respect to the use variance. The rationale for the requested waivers is that there is no new development. This is occurring, occurring in, thank you. This is occurring in buildings that have existed since, I believe, 1990. There are no new buildings proposed. And so waivers were requested of those specific application requirements. Now, the board has already been reconstituted as a zoning board of adjustment. So we do have the option, I guess, of considering the completeness of the variance request later if needed. Although I don't know if it's something we might be able to briefly address now just to have everything queued up as we begin our hearing.
So the process that we're going to follow is we'll just go through the first 2, right? Because if either of those are granted, we don't need to get to the last one.
Then we won't need it.
Yep,
Okay.
so we'll address completeness if we get there later on.
I think that makes sense because I'm very optimistic that you have everything you need to favorably grant relief under the first 2. So with that, let me just check my notes here. All 3 are complete. We've already, one of the things that I would like to clarify procedurally is I just want to make sure that I understand who the alternates are on the board. There were some names referenced that are not actually on the website. And so I just wanted to make sure that I'm clear about that because I have had a case where an alternate made a motion and it ended up creating some problems for my client. So in terms of the participating members this evening, could you just identify which members are actually participating?
We have one alternate, and that's Miss Maria Teresi. She's alternate number 1. Everyone else is a Class 4 member of the zoning board.
So we have Mr. Kadri,
Yes.
Ms. Deadweiler,
Here.
Mr. Kohut,
Yes.
and Wiggum.
Yes.
Catenacci, excuse me if I say these wrong.
You did pronounce it correctly, Capnacci.
McGovern. And Van Horn.
Yes.
And then Teresi. Thank you for indulging me in that. It's not a a roll call. I just want to make sure
I
we,
just-
I had a third hearing. It was 11 o'clock and an alternative made a motion, and we were all fried and didn't notice, so we had to correct that. So in any event, I would like to call would you like to first swear in both of the witnesses at
Yeah.
once?
So I'll
Okay.
swear everybody in, our professionals and, your witnesses as well, so we can get it on the record. So everyone testifying today, can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, Mr. Monahan, would you just briefly introduce yourself and confirm that you live at the subject property?
Yes, my name is Robert Monahan. I live at 35 Rosemont Ringoes Road in Ringoes, New Jersey. I reside in this residence as well as currently operate my landscape business, which is RJM Landscaping.
And obviously that's in this township. Ringoes is your mailing address. And you purchased this property in June of 2022,
Yes,
and you reside at this property with your girlfriend.
correct.
You operate a landscaping business referred to as RJM Truck Parts a landscaping business which is RJM Landscaping, and then a RJM Truck Parts business you would also had, correct?
Yes,
And the landscaping business is operated out of the rear of the property.
correct.
So let's talk about just the landscaping business for starters. What services do you offer for the landscaping business?
We stick to just general maintenance of just the weekly cutting of the lawn, as well as we install mulch, trim bushes, as well as plant shrubs, just the basic maintenance around our customers' houses.
And how long have you been in this business?
Since fall of 2017.
Okay. And we're going to provide some more details to you about the actual operational details of the business that has been requested in your professional reports. So I intend to get into a little bit more of that later on, so don't worry, that is coming. And as I mentioned, you also have a truck parts business, correct?
Correct.
And that's primarily focused on the sale of truck beds, used truck beds?
Yes, mostly rust-free truck beds that we get from down south.
Okay, and you had operated that truck parts business at the property in addition to the landscaping business, correct?
Correct.
And you had discussions with the zoning officer regarding the truck parts business, correct?
Yes.
And what did he advise you about the truck parts business?
He had advised me that he did not want to see any of these truck parts outside. He told me that if I was going to keep them on the property, that to code they had to be inside and out of sight.
And at that time, you did not have legal counsel or get a legal opinion about that advice, correct?
Correct. I previously got a zoning violation for that, and then I took care of that with the zoning officer, and I cleaned everything up, and there was no longer those truck parts outside on my property.
Okay. And so just to confirm, you have discontinued operating the truck parts business, correct?
Correct.
So with respect to this application, although we expect that the truck parts business will come up, you understand that your application tonight is just to continue the landscaping business, and that any of the relief requested tonight is just permitting a landscape business and would not permit a truck parts business at the property, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, when you purchased this property in June of 2022, you closed on June 10 of 2022?
Yes, around there. It got pushed back due to title issues, but
Okay.
it was around that date.
That's the date on the deed, and, which is Exhibit 1. Well, that's an exhibit, we'll get around to that. But you purchased from Arlie Proctor and Lisbeth Proctor, correct?
Yes,
And they purchased in 2001 from Frederick Johnston?
correct.
Okay. And when you purchased the property, was it your understanding that the landscape business was a legally existing, pre-existing use and occurring in a legally permitted pre-existing structure?
Correct. The two previous owners, Frederick Johnson, he had run his landscape business out of there since 1990, as I was told.
Okay. So I would like to start going through the exhibits now. Ms. Smith, is it your preference that these get marked, or will you be relying upon my application?
We can go the way that you have them listed, since you listed them,
Okay,
neatly.
okay, thank you. I appreciate.
It's easier for
I-
everybody rather than starting to give things new names.
I try. I do plan to introduce them in a different order than
That's
they
okay.
are in my exhibit list, but I will get through each one.
That's okay, no
So,
problem, that's great.
You should all have, hopefully this will help you orient to it, an exhibit list that has been updated as of June 3rd. Every time the application was updated, we provided an updated exhibit list. So if you are seeking to have the most recent one, it's revised through June 3rd, and it states that at the top.
In which file?
No, that's yours.
Oh, okay.
That's the one that
Oh, okay, thank you. Duh,
I'm just helping.
I can use it.
Are you ready?
Everyone good?
Okay. Yeah, okay. So I would first like to discuss Exhibit 1. Exhibit 1 is the May 15th, 2023 zoning permit. And the date that this was filed is, would you read the date that it was filed, please?
May 15th, 2023.
Okay. And would you please describe in the zoning permit what it is that you requested?
I was looking to store the trucks, equipment, tools, and material for my landscape business. Everything on my property is related to that landscape business, and to build special pull and drag trucks for personal use as a hobby. The parts and equipment are used for the business.
And you do have, in fact, that hobby, correct? You have a handful of personal trucks as well?
That is correct.
Okay. And this was marked approved, correct?
Yes.
By the zoning officer on May 15th, 2023. Attached to this, the zoning officer included a note on page 3, a few notes. So would you please read the first note that was included on the zoning permit approval by Mr. Wozniak?
Received documentation showing that a landscape business was granted permission to operate, along with a permit for a pole barn to store landscaping equipment and materials, along with zoning approval.
Okay. There's a second note here. Would you please read that into the record?
Owner should seek a letter from the board recognizing the pre-existing non-conformity use to the
Okay.
township.
So what I want to point out about that comment is that legally, I don't understand it. Either a zoning officer approves a zoning permit, or they deny it and they send them to the board to have some form of an application. At the time that Mr. Monahan received this, it was an approval. And he operated in reliance on this approval. The idea that he seek a letter from the BOA is not, you don't get letters from the BOA. You don't just show up and say, can I have a letter from you? So, this was in effect treated as a binding zoning permit that he received, he applied for, and it was marked approved, and he proceeded to rely upon this zoning permit. I next would like to review Exhibit 2. Exhibit 2 is the September 28, 2023 rescission of this zoning permit that we just reviewed. And reviewing the exhibit, Mr. Monahan, would you please explain the basis for the rescission that was stated in this letter of September 28?
They rescinded that zoning permit due to information received regarding the prior use in the barn at the above property.
Do you know what that means?
I do not.
So, to this day, you do not understand why he rescinded the zoning permit, correct?
Correct. I had asked him an email, and I have yet to get a response of why the permit was rescinded in the first place.
And he was contracted through West Amwell, so he's no longer the zoning officer, as I'm sure you know, but for the record. Okay, let's move on to Exhibit 3. Simultaneous with the rescission of the zoning permit, you received the September 28, 2023 zoning violation. This zoning violation, I will just take note, there's no real communications that are specific to Mr. Monahan other than to cite two areas of the code. Specifically, he's referring to the Amwell Valley Agricultural District and allowed uses along with its schedule of zoning requirements, and basically saying that this has been violated. Did you understand why this was issued to you at the time it was issued?
At the time, no, I was just told that there was the thought that there was a previous violation, is what I was told over phone call.
Okay. And in fact, there is no previous violation in the record. I've pulled all of the public records for this matter through Oprah requests and reviewed them all, and there was no prior violation. I'm sure it would have been produced in the reports if there had been one. I personally did not find anything in my public records requests. Exhibit 4. Now, what size, do you have a larger, this size of an Exhibit 4? Make sure that you have the size that's readable. This is the size that it
This
came.
is the one I think you dropped off with the application.
Okay, very good, okay. So Exhibit 4 is a plan of survey that is dated April 20, 2023. You obtained this after you moved into your property, correct?
Yes,
Because you closed in June of '22, and now this is almost a year later, you've obtained a plan of survey. So you did not get a survey at the time of purchase, correct?
that is correct.
So would you briefly describe the buildings that are in the front part of the property, which is referring to that portion which is closest to Route 604?
There's a two-story dwelling to the front of the property, which is where I reside.
Okay, and it looks like there's also some structures indicating your septic system is up there,
Correct.
your well is up there, and you have, the drive comes in there, correct?
Yep.
And then this driveway continues along the property and it goes to the area in the rear. Would you please describe what is back there when it says one-story building? Would you describe that building, please?
There is a pole barn at the back of the property that is surrounded by stone, and that's what is used to store the equipment inside.
Okay, now, there is a reference there to retaining wall over, so that is a retaining wall that you installed?
Yes, during one rainstorm, when I bought the property, there was a small retaining wall and it all washed out. And then we put the retaining wall up to prevent it from washing out in the future.
Okay,
And in this survey, it was 6 inches over the property line. And since this survey, the wall has been taken back and photos were sent to Stephen Rosnick, the zoning officer, and he approved them to show that I was no longer on the neighbor's property.
okay, so there's currently no encroachment onto that property?
That is correct.
And as per the survey, it shows it as the property of Robert and Patricia Kirchner, and they remain the current owners of record, correct?
Yes.
Now, there is on here an indication of a conservation easement scaled from the tax map. Had you seen that reference prior to getting this survey?
I did not. When I closed on this property, there was no mention of any conservation easements from the title company on the closing.
And would you please confirm that I've copied you on correspondence with your title company regarding that matter, wherein I asked the title company to research the records, applicable records, to see if they could find any reference to a conservation easement? You were copied on those requests, correct?
Yes.
And they responded, there's no record of any conservation easements for this property, correct?
Correct.
And then further, you were copied on the response I got from a public records request that I submitted to NJDEP, whereby I asked for a copy of any conservation easement applying to this property. You were copied on the response to that, and the NJDEP indicated that they have no record of there being a conservation easement on this property, correct?
Correct.
So the NJDEP and your title company are telling you that there is in fact no conservation easement on this property.
Correct.
I would now like to move on to the next one, Exhibit 5, please. Exhibit 5 is the deed that you received. And I see it's effective June 13th, so that would have been your date of closing.
Correct.
So June 13th, you closed on this purchase, and there's no reference to any conservation easements in this deed, correct?
Correct.
And this confirms if we look at the deed, as is usual and customary, on page 2 of this deed, it confirms that the Proctors purchased from Frederick Johnston in 2001. So that confirms his prior ownership, correct?
Correct.
And you are still in contact with Mr. Johnston, correct?
Correct.
He operated the original landscaping business, and then, correct?
Yes.
And then is it your understanding, tell me what happened when the Proctors purchased the business with respect to the landscaping business, please?
The Proctors had purchased the property from Fred Johnson, and then they allowed Mr. Johnson to continue to run his landscaping business at the back of the property while he did not still own the property. He had to live somewhere else, but continued to run his business out of there until I bought the property in June of 2022.
Okay. I'd like to jump ahead to Exhibit 13. Exhibit 13 is the February 1, 1990 UCC construction permit of Fred Johnston. There's going to be more helpful information on the subsequent documents, the subsequent exhibits, but this confirms for you the permit number 9010. It's the UCC permit application jacket, so you could just take notice of this exhibit, please. And now we'll correlate that to Exhibit 15. If we may move on to 15, skipping 14 for a moment. Exhibit 15 is that same permit number 9010. It is, again, a UCC document, and this is a building permit allowing work to proceed. And Mr. Monahan, would you please describe in this building permit the description of the work?
40 by 100 metal pole barn for use of landscape and farm business storage.
Okay, so this building permit, would you just, again, the date issued is in the upper right-hand corner. Would you please read that into the record?
February 1st of 1990.
Okay, so I want to take note that this is a building permit permitting the landscape business, the pole barn for the landscaping business and for storage, that is issued in February of 1990. So briefly, Township Ordinance 9212, which is under the land use chapter, specifically states, nothing in this chapter shall require any change in a construction permit, site plan, or zoning variance which was approved before the enactment of this chapter, provided that construction shall have started within 1 year from the effective date of this chapter, and the project shall be continuously pursued to completion. So, to paraphrase the relevant portions, nothing in this chapter shall require any change in a construction permit which was approved before the enactment of this chapter, provided that construction shall have started within 1 year of the effective date of this chapter. And that is in addition to the non-conforming use language within your ordinances that allows the continuation of a non-conforming use that's subsequently made non-conforming. Moving on to Exhibit 14. This also relates to construction permit 9010. And this is a certificate of occupancy issued. Would you please describe the description of the work for which a certificate of occupancy was issued?
40 by 100 metal pole barn for use of landscape and farm business equipment storage.
Okay, and the date that this was issued? Top right,
February of 1990.
February specifically?
February 20th, 1990.
Okay, so that pole barn went up quickly, and assuming that the permit was pulled before construction started. And again, this is an approval for a constructed pole barn in February of 1990. And I now would like to jump to Exhibit 23, please. is the East Amwell Township Tax Assessor's Record dated September 14th, 2004. Again, offered to demonstrate the continuation, first of all, historic nature of this use. We're going back many, many decades here, over 30 years.
Excuse me,
And
which exhibit? I'm sorry, I lost track here. What is it?
we
Thank
are
you.
on 23.
Thank you.
We don't
It
seem
did-
to have it.
I think it's in a different
Oh,
package.
that
that's-
was a supplemental submission. We
it's taking
filed
us a
the
minute.
appeal and then requested public records, reviewed the public records, and then had some supplemental exhibits. So you should have, I think, 3 packets. One is the initial appeal. Actually, you might have 4. One is the initial appeal. Next would be some supplemental exhibits, including this one. Then was the application for the certification and the variance, and then we submitted one final exhibit recently.
23 is in the packet dated January 4th.
It's in the packet dated January 4th. Thank you, Matt.
Oh, and on my exhibit list, I do usually tell you, let's see. Yes, so if you look at the exhibit list, it notes that that was added on January 4 as well. So that can help guide us if we get lost again. So again, this is a tax assessor's record dated 2004. And would you read into the record the comment that was made? That word, I believe, is rear. Do you agree?
Yes, rear of property looks like commercial use for a landscape business.
Specifically, parens landscaping co. N parens, correct?
Correct.
So, don't worry, Doug. It's fine here. Okay. Just want to give everybody a chance to get on the same exhibit. Are we ready to proceed?
We need a second here.
Sure, no problem.
There you go. That's
Got it.
So again, that is the September 2004 tax assessor's record, which memorializes the continued existence of the landscaping business at that time. Going back to the first packet, I wanted to go through some of the aerials with you. We received additional aerials, or we found additional aerials, so I've got aerials in 2 different packets. I'm now seeing that this means you're going to be jumping around a lot. I apologize, please bear with me. But I wanted to go through them in chronological order, which means we'll be jumping around. So the first would be Exhibit 6. And actually, before we get into the aerials, Exhibit 6 is the tax map. And I wanted to go over a few details with respect to the layout of the properties. If you could kindly pull up Exhibit 6, it's the tax map. And you can see on here in blue, Mr. Monahan's lot 1.10. And Mr. Monahan, would you please identify the property of Robert and Patricia Kirchner?
Yes, he is block 1.09 as well as block 1.2.
So it's
Block
block,
5, lot 1.09, and block 5, lot 1.2.
okay, so 1.09 and 1.2 or 1.20 perhaps is the property of Robert and Patricia Kirchner. And you have spoken with Fred Johnston about his historic operations at the property, correct?
Yes, he had previously farmed one of the 2 fields for Mr. Kirshner when he had resided at this residence.
And how did he access that field?
He was able to drive his farm equipment up the driveway just at the back of the property, and he was able to leave his equipment on Mr. Kirshner's property for months at a time while he was farming those fields.
Okay, did he create a direct access to the Kirchner property off of this property, or did that occur later when Mr. Kirchner was farming?
There was a sloped piece of land that were from the driveway to the fields that he just was able to drive his tractor and equipment up.
When you say he, are you referring to Mr. Johnston or Mr. Kirschner?
Fred, sorry. He was the one who was, as I'm told, was farming one or two of the fields for Mr. Kirschner.
Okay. And at the time that you purchased this property, did Mr. Kirschner access through your property to get to his fields?
For the first year that I lived there, nobody had farmed those fields at all. So no tractor or no farmer had come down my driveway to access those fields.
Okay. So they went a whole year without any farming activity?
Correct. I bought in June of 2022, and the fields were high, and for the rest of 2022, there was no activity on that property other than just regular bush hogging and just basic maintenance.
You should reach your destination by 7:49.
And so at some point did Mr. Kirschner come onto your property to access his field off of your property?
Yes, he had driven down my driveway, where he drove over a creek, and then he was able to drive his pickup truck up the right side of my property to access his fields.
When you say the right side, you're talking about viewing it from Rosemont Ringo's Road.
That is
So as per this map, it would be more westerly.
correct.
Okay. And did you ask him to discontinue?
Yes, he had come down my property when I was not home, and I had nicely asked him just to call me first before he came, just to make sure that I was home.
Okay, and what came of that? Is he still accessing via your property?
Unfortunately, after several times, after several times of asking him, he continued to drive down my property, and there was one time that he was backing out of my driveway, and to get to the property in the back, there is a creek, and there's a culvert with stone, and it drops off on both sides, and he backed his pickup truck down partially into the creek, where one tire of his 4 tires were in the air. And at that point, I deemed it was more of a safety issue where I didn't want any liability of someone getting hurt on my property. And I had filed a report with the New Jersey State Police just to document, to ask him to please stop coming on my property, as I didn't want anyone getting hurt. I didn't want any legal issues to come about from him accidentally driving off my driveway.
And did that stop him coming onto your property?
Kind of.
Okay.
He never stopped coming down the driveway at the time.
Okay, so what I wanted to get to was then, was there a can you explain to me the washout that occurred?
As you come down my driveway, looking to the right, there was old telephone poles stacked horizontally, about 3 or 4 high, and I guess over the years they just rotted out from the constant touching of the wet dirt. And after one rainstorm, part of that wall had collapsed, and all of the dirt that was behind that wall had washed out onto the stone. And we then put up a retaining wall, which I have a zoning permit for, to fix that. And because it washed out so much, we had to dig a little farther to the right, closer to the property line, so that there was no wet dirt and it was all solid. This way the wall would stay and not fall.
And you got a permit for that retaining wall, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and as a result of that retaining wall, you can no longer easily get up to the Kirschner property as well, right?
Yes, as I pushed it back, it made it tight to access those fields from my property.
Okay, so that was pretty much the end of Mr. Kirschner being able to access that field from your property?
That is correct.
Okay, and it's your understanding that he doesn't require that access, he just preferred it, correct?
Yes, Fred, the previous owner, or two previous owners, he was the one who had farmed those fields, so he was the only one that used it.
Okay. And we can confirm in your title, there's no right of any form of access occurring in the location. This was just a gratuitous ability to access a field, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then one more property I'd like to identify. Would you please identify the property that is owned by your neighbors, Bruce and Irene Harms?
That is Block 5, Lot 1.11.
Okay. And you've also had difficulties with those neighbors as well, correct?
Yes, there was a couple trespassing issues that we had to take care of.
Okay. And so they're on notice from the police to not trespass, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So let's now move on to a new topic. I would like to take you through the aerial photographs, just so that you have some visual of the use of this property as a landscaping business over the years. I'm gonna go backwards. So the first one is Exhibit 7. And this is a Google Earth image that you actually found and provided to me, correct?
Correct.
And in the very bottom, tiny print, you can see the date that this was.
June 6th of 2022.
So this was literally within a week of your scheduled closing, correct?
Correct.
And would that explain why the property is relatively clear? It is
Yes.
currently not being occupied because it's in the process of being, was it your understanding? I don't
Correct.
wanna.
No, correct, yes.
I don't wanna put words in your mouth, but why is this property, not showing any landscaping activity,
No.
any landscaping business activity?
Yes, it was a week prior to closing, so Fred Johnson had 90% of his equipment out of the property at that time.
Okay, obviously that's just an estimate to illustrate a point. Okay, so let's jump to Exhibit 4 in order to keep these in chronological, excuse me, 24. Exhibit 24, which would have been, the January 4 packet, please.
What are we looking for?
The January 4, 24
24.
January 4
It's a
packet has Exhibit 24.
Looks like it's an aerial.
And this is in the cluster of documents, this is dated January 4. I don't have that.
Right here.
22, right?
Packet.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. This is a map from NJ Maps of Rowan University dated, that is from 2020. Now, Mr. Monahan, can you describe what we are looking at here?
At the back of the property, there is the metal pole barn, and then behind that, there is several, it appears to be 3 metal carports that were used to store a couple of the piece of equipment out of the weather. And then surrounding that building, there was tractors, trucks, trailers, snowplows, and other just landscape equipment that he stored on that property when not in use.
And this is at the time that Mr. Johnston was operating there, correct?
That is correct.
And those metal carports, you have removed those, correct?
Yes, they were removed at the closing.
But when you purchased the property, you visually saw those carports there, correct?
That is correct.
And when you did store your truck beds here, you stacked them behind the building in enclosures in that area, correct?
Yes, there was one carport that we were used to store those truck beds inside.
Okay. But that is no longer at the property, correct?
Correct.
And you have also made other changes, correct? You removed tell me what you did up
We
here.
removed the patio and the below-ground pool, and it was replaced with a newer, smaller patio as well as a new deck, which I also pulled a construction and zoning permit for.
Okay. So this Rowan map that we found later was, I thought, a little easier to see and read. It's very similar to Exhibit 8, which is also a 2020 aerial, so we could just take note of that and not jump to it if you would rather. But Exhibit 8 is just a very similar aerial from the NJ GeoWeb website. For all I know, they're the exact same image. I can't quite know for sure. So that would be Exhibit 8. We can go back in time further to 2015 and review Exhibit 9. And this correlates also with Exhibit 25, which would be Rowan University's version of the 2015 aerial, which we again found and resubmitted as a supplement, believing it was easier to zoom in and see a little bit more. So both Exhibit 9 and Exhibit 25 are aerials from 2015. So, Mr. Monahan, do you see here the landscaping business being operated?
Yes, there are several pieces of equipment, trucks, and trailers that are currently in the map on this property.
Okay. Are you able to see in this older photograph where the point of the field access was?
Yes, there is, right where the property widens, on the map would be the left side, is where there was a dirt slash grass area where Mr. Johnson had gained access to Mr. Kirshner's field at that time.
And that's where Mr. Kirchner had also attempted to gain access to his field?
That is correct.
So most importantly, this illustrates that a pre-existing landscaping business as of 2015 in the same pole barn that was subject to the permit in 1990, correct?
Correct.
All right, we can go back to 2012.
Which exhibit are we looking for now?
26. This was one that we only found on the Rowan website. So Exhibit 26 is 2012. I think you have the gist of what we're doing here. We're going back through time to document the continuous nature of the pre-existing use. And so this again is 2012 Rowan photography. And can you please describe here, I mean, what you see in terms of the landscaping business being operated?
In the front of the building, it appears to be several landscaping trucks and trailers, and then directly around the building, there's a bunch of equipment and attachments, and then at the rear of the property, there appears to be a bunch of landscape trailers parked.
Okay. And continuing back to 2010, in 2010, we have Exhibit 10, and this is from NJ GeoWeb. And are you able to continue to see the landscaping business here?
Yes, you can see in front of the building, there is several landscaping trucks and trailers out front.
Okay. And continuing backwards, we found in Rowan's mapping 2007, submitted that as Exhibit 24. Let me make sure I didn't
Yeah,
miss.
24th of 2010.
Yeah, I think I misnamed it in my notes to myself. It would actually be Exhibit 27
Oh. For 2007.
for 2007, yes. Would you do the same with the 2007 mapping, please?
Yes, there is, again, several landscaping trucks and trailers parked in front of the medical barn, as well as it appears to be landscape equipment and attachments stored behind the building, as well as a couple other, it appears to be attachments and landscape material stored at the rear of the property behind the building.
And there's also storage along the retaining wall, correct?
Yes, they were actually snow plows that he kept along the side.
Okay.
By the retaining wall, do you mean the wall that's, if you're looking at it from the street on the right-hand side?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And now we will go back to 2002, Exhibit 11. This is from the NJ GeoWeb. This happens to be an infrared aerial, which gives you a little bit different view. We don't have to worry about the trees blocking anything. Did I say different? Oh, it's 2002.
And again, there is several landscape trucks, trailers, and equipment stored in front of the building and as well at the rear of the building.
Okay, and continuing on, I don't want to go too fast, I want to go too slow. I don't want to waste anybody's time. Just let me know if you need me to adjust, please. Going back to Exhibit 12, we are in 1995, another infrared aerial from GeoWeb. As is often the case when we start getting back to this point in time, these are much less clear images to see. This was the best we could find at that time. You can't clearly see what's going on here. Would you say this is suggestive of the same use that we have been seeing documented in the rest of these records?
That is correct.
And we have Exhibit 28, which is also from 1995. That happens to be the aerial version. Let's take a look at that and see if it's any clearer. It's perhaps zoomed in a little more, but I believe the best that you could say is suggestive of the same use continuing in 1995.
Correct.
Okay. Now, Mr. Monahan, has it been your intention to get all permits and approvals that are required to operate at this property the way that you've wanted to?
Yes, before any work was done, I had always got all the required zoning and construction permits before any work was even started.
Okay. So, in submitting to the board for credibility purposes, what I want to do, and I'm gonna do a quick highlight of this, and I'm gonna let you decide if you wanna ask more questions when you're ready. But what I'm referring to, I'm gonna do a quick, you don't have to go through them, I'm gonna tell you what they are. Exhibit 16 is a 2022 zoning permit for the fence replacement. Exhibit 17 is a UCC permit to demolish the in-ground pool. Exhibit 18 is approval of a permit to replace an oil furnace. Exhibit 19 is a zoning permit for the fence replacement. Exhibit 20 is a zoning permit for a deck replacement. Exhibit 21 is a zoning permit for the retaining wall to be constructed. And Exhibit 22 is a 2023 permit for the deck, UCC deck replacement, UCC permit for deck replacement. So again, we are talking about Exhibits 16 through 21. If you want to take a brief moment with those exhibits, those are offered to demonstrate an intention to obtain permits and approvals. Now, I also want to review Exhibit 29. Exhibit 29 is the location survey for Frederick Johnston.
Is that in the January 4th packet or in
Um,
I have an April 3rd packet.
I'm going to circulate to you larger copies of this. We did print them larger for you, so if you would like to take one and pass it on, please. Should be plenty for everybody and possibly some left over.
Yeah.
Again, this is an exhibit already in the record, and we are circulating larger copies of it, because we thought it might be easier for you to read than the copy previously provided. So this is survey prepared for Mr. Johnston. Could you read into the record the date of this survey?
September of 1992.
And so this was after the previously discussed certificate of approval for that pole barn. And can you confirm that this shows the location of the metal frame building?
Yes,
And that is the area of the pole barn where the landscaping business is operated?
correct.
And then it also shows an area of gravel, drive, and parking area, correct?
Yes,
And now on this survey, the areas that were marked a conservation easement on your survey, they're called a drainage ditch and drainage easement here, correct?
correct,
And you were unaware of any such drainage ditch or drainage easement, correct?
correct.
This survey was obtained by requesting public records from the township, is where we obtained this survey, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so this just confirms the existence of the pole barn in 1992. So the last exhibit that I have for you, I want to take a moment to explain. The last exhibit that I have is Exhibit 30. And to lay some foundation for Exhibit 30, we're just going to revisit briefly. You don't have to go and look at these, I'll just remind you. Exhibit 1 was a May 15, 2023 zoning permit, and then that was rescinded in September of 2023. Now, for a May 15 zoning permit, the deadline to appeal the issuance of a zoning permit is 20 days, which would have been June 4th, 2023. So, after June 4th, 2023, the townships is stopped from rescinding or from revoking the zoning permit unless there is some form of a fraud or something very egregious, or it fundamentally violates, the law and policy of the township. So there is a case that I wanted to review with you, and it's called the Sikowski case. So just give me a moment to grab my notes on that. But when we're talking, this is relevant to appeal, okay?
Do you have the citation for that?
Sure, absolutely, and I'll go into it in a moment, but it's 238 NJ Super 255, the Appellate Division, 1990. The case is called Sikowski v. Zoning Board of Adjustment of the Board of Lavalette, and I did bring a copy for counsel in case you would prefer to have one.
I'll Google it.
Okay. So, in any event, we've asked for you to find that the rescission of the zoning permit and the issuance of the violation were improper, that they should have remained in place, that there was no actual grounds for rescinding that, it was properly issued in the first place. And again, that zoning permit stated that a landscaping business had existed, there was records on file with the township, and it was a lawfully permitted prior non-conforming use. So we've asked you to find that it never should have been rescinded, and the violation should have never issued. Now, even if you agree with us, I still think it makes sense to also ask you to rule on the certificate of prior non-conforming use, because it creates the better record in the municipal file and on behalf of Mr. Monahan and everyone involved. So, assuming you agree with those things, we don't need to move on to the variance standard. But if we were going to move on to the variance standard, we also have the positive and negative criteria to consider of a variance standard in terms of, threats and concerns to the public good, and that somewhat would involve complaints. So, relative to all of these things, let me briefly tell you about the Sikowski case. So, in the Sikowski case, which again was 1990, so it was a little different back then. The Zoning Board of Adjustment was dealing with a building permit. But in this case, the Zoning Board of Adjustment, through what it deemed an application for interpretation, determined that a house being constructed violated the zoning ordinance. Now, a permit had been issued by the zoning officer for that house, stating that it was in compliance with the zoning ordinance. Similar in this case, where a permit had been issued stating that the use could occur. A neighbor began making objections to the township, claiming that the construction violated the zoning ordinance with respect to height. Now, it turns out in this case that that was correct. This house was violating the zoning ordinance with respect to height. So that's distinguishable in Mr. Monahan's case we don't believe that it was, we don't believe that the original zoning permit was wrong. It was the rescission that's wrong, because he does comply with the ordinances as a prior non-conforming use, which allows those to continue. So the complaints of that neighbor resulted in a hearing on whether permits should have issued. This occurred well after the 20-day deadline to appeal the previously issued permit, and the board determined that the building permit should be revoked, circumventing the 20-day appeal. So, in other words, there was a permit, 20 days went by, a neighbor complained with the township, wrote a letter, the zoning board reviewed it, and determined that the permit should be rescinded, but it was after the 20-day period, and because it was a de facto way for that objecting party to circumvent the 20-day appeal deadline, the court found it was wrong. In other words, if an objector has a problem with a landscape business zoning permit that has been issued, the objector needs to file an appeal of that, not incessantly complain to the township until a permit is rescinded months later. So the court again found that once the 20-day appeal period passed, even if there was a mistake in the issuance of the permit, if the property owner relies on that permit, the municipalities has stopped. And then when there's been reliance, and Mr. Monahan has relied on this. So in the case of Mr. Monahan, there was no mistake in the issuance of the zoning permit. Now, bear in mind, he got a zoning violation for the truck parts business, and worked with the township to stop that, as he's testified, to discontinue that. He did not appeal that. But as a separate matter, he got a zoning permit allowing the landscape business to continue. And it was not until it was rescinded, months and months and months later, that now Mr. Monahan has had to appeal and appear here on that limited issue. So what I have in this packet of correspondence, and I can tell you I've been doing land use a long time. I've never submitted a packet of correspondence between objectors and the township before. It is not my intention to go back to grade school with all of you tonight. So I'm going to briefly offer to you what I think is the probative evidentiary value of this, and then I can get through it as briefly as possible. The probative value is this. This evidence will show, okay, that Mr. Kirchner persisted in making complaints to the zoning officer about the truck parts business while acknowledging that the landscape business was permitted. This correspondence will show that Mr. Kirchner only complained about the truck parts business, not the landscaping business. This correspondence will show that Mr. Kirchner had an attorney during the appeal period, yet did not file an appeal. This correspondence will also show that Mr. Kirchner instead complained to the zoning officer, the township committee, at least 2 committee members individually, and to the clerk, making accusations that the zoning officer was not doing his job, was not trustworthy, and similar claims in the public record about the zoning officer. And this will show that after the 20-day appeal period, these complaints and accusations from Mr. Kirchner caused the zoning, well, in my opinion, it's suggestive that it led to the zoning officer rescinding the zoning permit for the landscape business without explanation. So the Sikowski case stands for the premise that rescission of the zoning permit for the landscaping business was not proper. The zoning officer acted in response to these complaints and created a de facto mechanism by which the neighbor achieved reversal of the zoning officer's actions outside of the 20-day time frame, and this is reversible error. So with that, we can go through this packet in the briefest detail to establish these points for you, and I feel like I'm obligated to do so. So why don't I try to get through it as quickly as possible for you, okay? What I've done to try to make this easier is you are going to take note that Exhibit 30 has my office put on this exhibit in the bottom right-hand corner page numbers on the exhibit. So this is correspondence received by me in response to a relatively recent public records request. And if we were to turn to, we'll start with page 25 of this packet. So again, bottom right-hand corner, you'll find the page numbers. There was some problems with the township's technology. Portions of this are, if you would like quickly take a look at page 24, you can see how portions of it were printing as like single letters one after another. Fortunately, I don't need to rely on too much of that, and I'm doing my best to work around it. This is offered to you in the order that I received it from the township. I have not changed this in any way. This is the packet that was received from the township, which is why we're going to jump around it, and I've given you the page numbers. So actually, let's go to page 21. At the bottom of page 21, we have an exchange. Okay, at the bottom of page 21, we have, I'm sorry, I did want to start with 25. I have a little problem. There's not a pair of glasses that let me see this and that and you all at the same time. I've tried many times, so bear with me here.
It's called progressives. I have progressives.
I have it too, but it's like trying to get it just right. It's a bit
Mine
much.
works.
Yeah, I've got the three-way ones as well, so please bear with me. Okay, page 25, actually, April 21, 2023, exchange. So this is an exchange between Mr. Kirchner and the zoning officer, and I'm just going to tell you what you're looking at, so there's really no need for Mr. Monahan to testify. I'm putting this into the record. I'm not testifying. I'm just reading this document into the record to you. So October 21, 2023, exchange between Mr. Kirchner and the zoning officer regarding the zoning officer's review of your property. Zoning officer explained that he did not have jurisdiction to go onto the property, and Mr. Kirchner responds, "That is not what you told me, and you can see the violation from my property, exclamation point. If you want to clear this up, call me, exclamation point." Going along chronologically, now we will go to page 21. Again, more correspondence between Mr. Kirchner and the zoning officer. On May 5th, 2023, Mr. Kirchner advised that you called him about moving a structure on his property. He complained to the zoning officer about a junkyard in his backyard. Now, Mr. Monahan, his house is all the way over on the other lot, correct?
Correct. I can't even see his house from the edge of my property.
Okay. So Mr. Kirchner complained about a junkyard in his backyard. He does not include any complaint about the landscaping business. Also on page 21, on May 5th, 2023, Mr. Kirchner again writes to the zoning officer stating, "Seriously, I would like to know when you will complete the site visit, exclamation point. Again, he is operating a junkyard, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point." So he complained about a junkyard, and that does not include a complaint about the landscaping business. Moving on, also on page 20, still May 5th, 2023, the zoning officer responded, quote, "I have visited the site and I'm responding to you as a courtesy. I am working on the multiple issues. I've let you know that it's being addressed. I do not report to you, but as a courtesy, I have kept you updated. Have a good day," end quote. On pages 4 through 7 of this correspondence, there was correspondence between Robert Kirchner, and he's now corresponding with Mayor Jenna Casper Bloom. On May 23rd, the mayor advised that the zoning officer talked with Mr. Monahan, the property owner, and that he was working with Mr. Monahan. Again, on May 22, 2023, Mr. Kirchner, and this is on page 6, he advised that he has talked with another committee member, Rick Wolf, who is supportive, that is his word, and he complained to the committee that the zoning officer is not doing his job, and he complains that he does not trust the zoning officer. On page 5 of this packet, again, May 22nd, 2023, Mr. Kirchner said he is, quote, "concerned that the zoning officer, has not taken steps to shut him down, exclamation point. This is not what I take working with him to mean, exclamation point," in quotes. So essentially, in this correspondence, Mr. Kirchner is complaining about cabs and beds, meaning truck parts. He does not include any complaints or concerns about the landscaping business. On May 31st, 2023, the mayor advised him that a violation had been issued for the property. That refers to the truck parts violation. May 31st, 2023, quote, this is from Mr. Kirchner, I'm considering going back to the township committee with this, exclamation point. The zoning officer will not talk to me, exclamation point, end quote. He goes on to claim.
What page are you on?
This should still be on 5 according to my notes.
And Ms. Watt, can you just please explain to the board why all of this is relevant to your application tonight?
The Sitkovsky, so again, this is offered specifically to point out, first of all, the Sitkovsky standard, that he's essentially achieved a reversal of a zoning permit outside of the 20-day
I
deadline.
thought you said building permit, because I haven't had the opportunity to read the case. So you said
It
building
stands,
permit?
well, it
or
was a
zoning?
1990 case. The zoning officer issued a building permit to allow the house.
But not a zoning permit, right?
Correct, but that is not a distinguishable fact for the premise here.
So I have a couple questions about, I haven't read the case just based off what you mentioned, but based on your summary, just so the board's clear, right? You mentioned that it was revoked by the zoning officer, correct? And the construction has already been completed in this case, right? So we can think about how these cases are distinguishable. In that case, building permit was issued and it was after construction, correct? In the case that you're referencing?
Yes.
In this case, is it distinguishable that building's already there, everything's there, construction, there is no new construction? Is that possibly a distinguishing feature in these cases?
I don't think so. I don't think that's what the case stands for at all. I
Okay,
think
I'm just
yeah.
saying,
The case-
factually, are they distinguishable here? Because I think the board needs to,
They're
if we haven't
different.
had the opportunity to
A
talk about that.
distinguishable fact is a fact that would make the premise of the case not apply to this one. I don't believe that's a relevant distinguishable fact.
Okay, and then the other question I have, you said that at least in the case, again, I haven't read it, but based on your summary, permit was issued. Zoning officer didn't repeal that, right? It just went right to an interpretation to the board. Is that correct?
I'm
in
sorry,
this
one more
case?
time.
Permit was issued,
Mhm.
right in the case we're talking about, not your client's matter. Then went right to an interpretation, right? It wasn't a rescission, and then didn't go via appeal to the board. Is that correct?
That's correct. In that
Okay.
case, the zoning board took the action. In this case, the zoning board will either be upholding the action or confirming it shouldn't have been taken in the first place. So
But that is distinguishable factually.
it doesn't change the premise of the case, but
Okay.
it is a different fact, yes.
Okay, understood. I just wanted
Yeah.
to make sure that was clear for the
Yeah,
record.
but the premise of the case is that to circumvent the 20-day appeal deadline by utilizing the complaints and the pressure in the township to get the zoning officer to take negative action against Mr. Monahan is a way of having undone the zoning permit outside of the 20-day appeal period. We
Okay.
still don't know why the
I understand your
landscape
argument.
business
I just
zoning permit was
Wanted to
rescinded.
make sure since the board didn't have the
And I
opportunity to read the case.
I
and-
appreciate that.
Yeah,
I
no problem.
appreciate
Yeah.
that. And I did reference the argument
I
in,
do have
in a letter.
So we're here hearing an appeal of a zoning officer decision, correct?
And the certification
And
and
the
the
certification,
variance,
yep.
yeah.
And in that case, the zoning board was overriding the zoning officer? Is that what I'm
Yes, and
understanding?
yes, again, so the way it works with the case law is that a case can have different facts but stand for the same proposition, the same premise of not circumventing. So it is distinguishable in these ways, but the purpose for which it is offered, I believe, is on point. And I know it's a bunch of like legal speak, so, counsel is correct in that there's distinguishable facts. I've carefully reviewed it. I can offer it to you for the premise in support of the concept that taking action that would have the de facto effect of circumventing that 20-day appeal period in order to undo a zoning permit after the 20-day appeal period to bring effect to the intentions of an objector who I could continue through this testimony and show you says he had an attorney looking at this at the time that the appeal period was open and still did not file an appeal. So that is why it is offered. to you.
Understood.
And further, I'm also illustrating the point, because I'm with you. I mean, I thought long and hard about whether I was gonna do this, but Mr. Monahan needs to operate his business, and I'd love to just see if I can do this in maybe 5 or 10 more minutes to just get through this. 'Cause I don't particularly have a taste for it, getting into this kind of stuff, but what's relevant to a variance, the negative criteria. And we do believe that it is error to use all of these complaints to get a zoning permit basically rescinded and a violation issued when we don't even know why. We're providing to you all of this evidence that the landscaping business can continue. So why was this even rescinded? Where's the zoning officer? So that is why it's offered. So again, we were on,
3 or 4, I believe.
yeah, we're on pages 4 through 7, I think page 5 specifically. And on May 31st, Mr. Kirchner says, quote, "I'm considering going back to the township committee with this, exclamation point. The zoning officer will not talk to me, exclamation point," end quote. He goes on to claim a junkyard, complain about the truck parts. He does not include a complaint about the landscaping business. And on June 2nd, 2023, which is in the midst of that appeal period, Mr. Kirchner says, "I just spoke to my attorney. His position is that there is, quote, no path to compliance, exclamation point, end quote. You will have to get a court order to shut him down, exclamation point. I really would appreciate a call, exclamation point, thanks." So, quickly moving on, page 19, May 27, 2023. The zoning officer advises Mr. Kirchner regarding a claimed property line dispute, the fact that the deck was permitted. He tells Mr. Kirchner the deck is permitted, the fence is permitted, NJDEP clarification is needed, and the truck parts business received a violation. So by all appearances, he's complaining about the truck parts business. The truck parts business got a violation. Mr. Monahan has stopped the truck parts business and no longer operates at this property specifically. The zoning officer notes that he's aware that Mr. Kirchner has reported Mr. Monahan to the NJDEP. He reported Mr. Monahan to the Hunterdon County Health Department. He reported Mr. Monahan to the Hunterdon County Soil Conservation District. On June 5th, 2023, the zoning officer advised Mr. Kirchner that Mr. Monahan was in the process of removing the truck parts and the containers. Going in chronological somewhat here, is kind of loosely, but as much as I could to make sense of this, on page 1, we have some communication from Mr. Harms with the clerk on May 24th. Mr. Harms wrote to Miss Linda Giliberte, quote, "The landscaping business, which is considered a pre-existing non-conforming use based on a previous construction permit issued for the pole barn for the landscaping business, equipment, and a business in the previous zoning," let me get this right. Quote, "The landscape business, which is considered a pre-existing non-conforming use based on a previous construction permit issued for the pole barn for the landscaping equipment and business and the previous zoning permit," end quote. She also advised that Mr. Monahan had been issued the violation with respect to the truck parts business. So she's advising this neighbor who has complained that the landscaping business could be there, the truck parts business cannot. On June 11th, 2023, one more point of communication. Mr. Harms complained about the truck parts business, but not the landscaping business. At that point, it had already been addressed to the violation. I only have a few more of these, so don't worry, we'll be done soon. On September 6th, 2023,
Can you give us page numbers?
Oh,
Because
sure.
the dates jump all over the place.
yeah, I had a similar time. I spent a lot of time with this packet. Please go to page 22. September 6, 2023, the zoning officer advised Mr. Kirchner, As far as I'm concerned, he has removed all the auto parts, truck bodies as per my violation notice. My recommendation to him was to apply for a pre-existing non-conforming use to the Board of Adjustment. And on September 8th, 2023, Mr. Kirchner corresponded with, still on the same page.
Oh, I see.
Mr. Kirchner corresponded with the planning board secretary and then reached out to the zoning officer, and he stated, I understand that RJM can use the building for his equipment. So here Mr. Kirchner's acknowledging that, but does he still not need to get a variance for the business? There are many vehicles that are not related to landscaping. Again, Mr. Kirchner does not complain about the landscaping business. So that is the end of that. So we've already gone over this. I won't rehash. I like to sum up my point, but I've already said it a few times with respect to why that has been offered. So I just want to wrap up Mr. Monahan's testimony, which would be that we did receive some professional reports, and I wanted to briefly, efficiently I'll say, get through answering some of the questions that were asked by your professionals. So moving on with Mr. Monahan's testimony. The first question pertains to the hours of operation. So, now we've queued this up so that you understand why it is that we believe that not only should that zoning permit not have been rescinded and the violation not issued, but the township was equitably stopped from being able to do that, that it was a de facto, giving an objector a way of circumventing a 20-day deadline. But let's not even stand on that. You've got your own ordinance, which basically says, this is ordinance 9212, which basically says that an outstanding, it's called outstanding site plan approvals, zoning variances, and construction permits. So this basically says that because a construction permit was issued, nothing in the chapter, chapter 92, shall basically, what does it say? Nothing in this chapter shall require any change in the permit. So, moving on to the request for the certification of prior nonconforming use, I believe we have submitted evidence that this landscape business was there since 1990 with a permit, and it continued up until today. So now our next question for the certification of prior nonconforming use has to do with scoping questions. So obviously we need to confirm that the scope is within the scope that it's always been. So for example, if he quadrupled the size of his business, that would be an expansion of a prior nonconforming use. And so therefore a variance would be required. But if he remains within the scope of what it has always been, then it is appropriate and acceptable for the board to issue the certification of prior nonconforming use. So we'll now address those scoping questions that are in your professional's report. So could you please discuss the hours of operation of your business?
We start at 7 a.m. Monday to Saturday. We usually get back around 5 p.m. Monday to Friday, and then on Saturdays we tend to get back around 3 o'clock.
So wait, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I have it. 7 a.m. Monday to Saturday.
7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to
Got
Friday.
it, okay.
And then Saturdays are 7 to 3 p.m.
7 to 3, okay,
Correct.
thank you.
And when your employees come to your property, what do they do when they get there?
Once they arrive, they load up the trucks. For example, if they have to put in any lawn mowers or weed whackers or any other landscape equipment, they load up the trucks and trailers, and they are usually out of the property by 7:15. Every day is obviously different because we use different equipment, but we're usually out of there by 7:15, and then we come back around 5 p.m.
And on Saturdays?
at 3 p.m.
Okay. And does weather affect this schedule?
Yes, we work outside, so the weather is our biggest nemesis. So if it rains in the morning, we will start later. If we start 3 hours later, there is times that we will end 3 hours later. So if we start at 10, we may come back at 8 o'clock.
Okay, and that's pertains to all your crews or just one of your crews?
Mainly the lawn mowing crew, because we have to cut X amount of lawns every single week, and no matter rain or shine, everybody wants their grass cut. So we have to make sure that that is done on a weekly basis.
Regardless of weather?
Correct.
Okay. So of the 7 employees, there are 4 of their cars parked there, is that correct?
Correct, there's 7 total employees. 4 of them drive to my property in the morning, and the other 3 carpool.
Okay.
And then, of those 7 employees, 7 of them work Monday to Friday, and then on Saturdays, only 3 of those 7 employees work together, and they work from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Okay, and you're referring to, I've typed up notes from our meeting where we went through the planner's report together, and you answered all of these questions, correct? So you're going to be referring to this document, which are just some notes to address these questions so that we could get through this efficiently, correct?
Correct.
But these are all answers that came from you, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So your 7 employees work in, describe the crews.
We work in 2 to 3 crews. 2 days a week, we run 3 crews, and then the other, from Monday to Friday, it is, there's 3 crews that work 2 of the 5 days, and then the other 3 days, there's only 2 crews. So there's the 2 crews combined for 1 day, for 3 days.
Okay.
So they all work together.
And on Saturday?
There's only the 1 crew, the only 3 of the employees, they work from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Okay. And can you give a general description of the landscaping business, the way you're using it to date, and confirm that this is how it will continue in the future?
The property is strictly used to store all of the landscaping equipment, trucks and trailers. Outside of the property, we keep all of the larger equipment, the trailers and the trucks, as well as I have a couple material bins. We store 2 different types of mulch for customers, as well as stone, just for easy access in the morning or in the afternoons for the guys. And then inside the building, we store all of the smaller equipment, such as rakes, shovels, lawnmowers, weed whackers, all the other small equipment is stored inside the building when not in use, and every night.
And the mulch and stone are in containment areas?
That is correct. There is a blacktop pad that backs up to the retaining wall that I pulled a permit off of for, that we use to store. There is a bin for black mulch, and then there is a bin for hardwood or natural. It's brown mulch, but it's just not just 2 different colors, black and brown.
Okay. And the drainage easement behind your house, there's a pretty steep bank that leads down to the bottom of that drainage easement?
Yes, and that retaining wall that I pulled a permit for, as well as anything the blacktop is well outside of that drainage easement.
And as a result of that change in elevation, has water ever risen to the level of being anywhere near any of your materials or equipment?
No, not that high.
Okay. But the water has come off of the field and did, during one storm, take out that one portion, correct?
Yes, my property is lower than Mr. Kirshner's field, probably about 7-8 feet.
Okay.
So,
Can you describe your personal, because again, you do occupy this property personally, can you please describe your personal outdoor storage?
on the property, I have 3 gooseneck trailers that are used for personal use. I have 3 personal vehicles and 1 SUV. 2 of those vehicles are parked in the garage every night, and then 2 are stored in the back of the driveway outside of the pole barn.
And you drive one of them every day?
Correct.
And you
Or-
have, go ahead.
Yes, I drive one of them every single day.
And you have a trailer used for personal hauling?
Yes.
What about quads?
Yes. One of the other 2 trailers, a bunch of my friends and I, we enjoy going quadding and riding using dirt bikes, and those trailers are used to haul those quads and dirt bikes to where we ride, because you legally can't ride in New Jersey.
Okay, and you have, where do you store that stuff?
Some of them are stored in the garage of my house, and the other ones are stored inside the metal pole barn at the rear of my property.
And then you also have 2 trucks that are registered to a company you created called RJM Farms.
Correct.
Okay. And where do you keep those?
One of them, both are kept on the property. One is kept under a carport at the back of the property, and the other one is just stored outside.
So is there a carport there still?
There is 1 carport that I was allowed according to the zoning officer. Because there was 3 10-by-10 carports when I bought the property, so to stay in the non-conforming continued use, I had to get the same size. So there, instead of 3 10-by-10, there's 1 30-by-30.
Okay.
So I'm only allowed X amount of square foot per the zoning officer's email.
Okay, that's a clarification on the record. Okay. And so you provide support to farmers
Correct.
with that?
Yep.
Okay. In terms of the company storage, back to RJM Landscaping, what is stored inside the pole barn?
There's about 8 lawnmowers, 10 weed whackers and blowers. There is 15 snow plows that are stored inside, and then a variety of hedge trimmers, shovels, rakes, and all the tools that go along with the landscape business.
Okay. Describe, like, you have grass seed?
There's grass seed and starting fertilizer that is stored in sealed bags on pallets inside the building that we use to, when we regrade someone's yard, we spread topsoil and then we spread grass seed and starting fertilizer for new growth of the lawn.
Okay. And do you have any liquid fertilizers?
I do not.
Do you have-
I do not.
Do you have any liquid pesticides?
I do not.
Do you have a pesticide license?
I do not.
Did Mr. Johnston?
I am unaware.
So, in the record, do you please recall the public records request to NJDEP that was submitted earlier and produced records with respect to Mr. Johnston? Am I refreshing your recollection?
Yes, he had to report to NJDEP, I believe, of the quantity of each type of fertilizer that he stored on the property for record.
Okay, as well as other materials,
Correct.
correct? So you don't meet those thresholds, correct?
Correct, I don't have any of those materials on site.
Okay. And your personal storage inside the pole barn, you have, what do you have in terms of personal, not the other business or the farm, but the personal storage? You also have,
Inside the building, I have a few of my quads and then a few just miscellaneous tools and parts to fix those toys, to sort of say, those quads and dirt bikes.
okay, do you have spare parts for the landscaping business in there?
Yes, there is extra lawnmower blades, there is extra spindles, extra belts, and any tools that will go wrong during the day that we store inside the building so that we don't, when we break down, it's quick and efficient to get back and going.
Okay, and do you do repairs on your landscape or any of your vehicles in the pole barn?
Yes, we just do basic maintenance on the trucks and the lawnmowers.
Okay. What operations occur outdoors?
Strictly storage of the trucks, the trailers, and the larger machines, as well as a few of the attachments for those machines, and then obviously the storage of the mulch and the stone bins that we have. So most of the equipment is stored inside, and then only the larger pieces of equipment don't even fit inside the building, so they have to get stored outside.
Okay, and then testimony was requested documenting that the non-conforming use was permitted at the time. What we have is that the dates that the Amwell Valley Agricultural District was promulgated and the fact that a zoning permit issued and a building permit issued. So in terms of the Amwell Valley District, if you review right in your E-Code 360 where it has the notes on it, it basically states that it was the first date referenced in its history of amendments and then passage is, if I'm reading this correctly, and perhaps your planner will have input, is 2001. So
That says amended, is that correct? It doesn't say
It
promulgated,
says-
it says amended?
well, it says amended.
Amended, but not promulgated.
Beginning, I'm starting at the beginning,
I'm-
because maybe you'll have the answer. What it specifically says is amended 8/14/1997 by ordinance, and then it has that ordinance, and then it goes on to say 1997 by that ordinance, 1997 by another ordinance, 1999 by another ordinance, 1999 by yet another, and then 2001 by ordinance 0119. So we've asked but not been able to find any sort of documentation with respect to that. But we do know that this only goes back to 2001. It's the best I can offer, unless you can produce the code book. But we do have the issuance of a zoning permit and a building permit
Okay.
in 1990. So That's the best, I don't, I think I understand what you're asking.
Yeah, it's just, we don't,
It
you know,
doesn't say the date of,
lawfully permitted non-conforming use is what we need in
so,
order for the standard to be,
right,
for the applicant to be successful.
Right.
So that's an integral question to the,
right. So, question number 6, do you have any signs up at the property which denote the landscaping business?
Yeah, there is no signs, on the property at all, so there's no way to even be able to tell what's back there.
Okay. And there was a question of when is the gate open?
The gate is open when the guys are there on the property working, and then the gate is closed when we're not there. It's now open all the time because in one of the storms, it blew open and it ripped the bottom of the gate in half, and it has yet to be fixed. But so now the gate's just hanging there and it's wide open.
Okay. And how many vehicles access the landscaping business on a daily basis?
There's 5 vehicles that are registered under the landscape business. 3 of them go to work every day. The other one is what I drive every day, my personal vehicle, and the other one is it's a vehicle that one of my employees, he drives it from his house to his work, and then that's it. He's been with me for 8 years. That's his vehicle that no one else drives, and it sits at my property all day long when he's working.
Okay. And you use 3 vehicles for the landscape business on a daily basis?
That is correct.
And all the other vehicles are personal or the farm ones?
Correct.
Okay. So the total number of vehicles is?
There's 4 personal there's 4 personal vehicles, 5 landscape vehicles, and then 2 farm vehicles.
Okay.
That's 11.
So the personal vehicles we can set aside. So if we back those out?
Then there's 9 vehicles.
9 vehicles, okay. So we looked at those images of the aerial photographs, and we saw that there were many vehicles over the years, correct?
Correct.
Okay. How many parking spots? Again, another question from the professional report. How many parking spots do you estimate that you have?
There are probably about 15 to 20 parking spots open around the building.
Okay. And are most of them full or empty?
Most of them are empty. As you drive around the building, it's wide open.
And of your 7 employees, how many of them park a car there during the day?
4 of them park vehicles. The other 3 carpool.
Okay. And at this point, with the cessation of the truck parts business, do you allow any customers or anybody else to come to you on the property as part of your day-to-day operations?
Nobody accesses the property other than me along with my 7 employees.
Okay.
No customers or anything else is done on that property.
There's also been a request of what types of vehicles are parked there. Could you describe the types of trucks?
They're all just pickup trucks and dump trucks. There's F-250s, 350s, and 450 pickup trucks, and then there is 2 F-550 dump trucks that are parked there at night.
Do you currently have any storage containers?
I do not.
when you say storage containers, is that different than like mulch? Just to be specific.
Yeah, the mulch areas are not really as enclosed as sort of storage bins or anything like that.
Yeah, just something
Think like
pretty
trash
clear.
enclosure kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
A trash enclosure?
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a dumpster that is in the
Okay.
back, but has a sealed lid, and they come once a week to dump just the garbage.
And is that in the front of the pole barn?
Currently it is, yes.
Okay, and you've spoken with Mr. Fred Johnston regarding this, correct?
Yes.
And for how long did he operate the business?
For about 30 to 35 years. He pulled the permit to put the pole barn up in 1990, and he ran that business out of there until I bought the property in June of 2022. And I was told that he had roughly 15 to 20 employees. Every year it fluctuated a little bit different based on the workload. So he did all landscaping, and then he also farmed 1 or 2 of the fields at the adjacent property for Mr. Kirshner.
So that is the extent of my direct questioning of Mr. Monahan, getting all the facts into the record. And after you have completed, your questionings and those of the board and the public, we will have his professional planner.
So Ms. Vaught, the way our bylaws work is what we'll do is we have cross-examination of the witness.
Yes,
the
I
one
just-
witness at a time. So we'll do that. We'll allow our professionals to make any comments for this witness. Obviously, our board can jump in whatever they wish. We'll do public comment just on this witness. And then if we're satisfied, we'll proceed with your planner. Good. So,
Open to.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. Can everyone hear me? Good? Well? Thank you, Chair and Board. So we kind of just went through a lot of information there, so I will try to keep my questions organized. One note that I want to make is that there was a lot of permits that we just went through. The permits that were issued in 1990 are not zoning permits. They are construction permits and they're building permits, and I think that's a very important distinction to make in this matter, based on the fact that they didn't really evaluate this from a zoning perspective. So I just wanted to add that note. Based on one of the surveys provided, I think that it's clear that the controversy with the easement, it is a drainage easement. I was able to find it on tax maps. This historical survey, the one that's a little bit older, Exhibit 29, indicates it as a drainage easement. So I think that's an important note for this case, that we have a pretty significant 50-foot drainage easement.
What is the implication of that?
I would love to let the engineer get into that a little more specifically,
Okay.
but there's a lot of grade changes and it's there for a reason. I don't know exactly what creek or watershed is nearby, but it's typically there for a reason. It's associated with the large swaths of farmland that are adjacent to these properties. So I just think that's an important distinction for the board to be aware of. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of not really cross-examining. I'm just kind of running through everything we just talked about. Could you provide a little bit more testimony about sort of the specifics of between when Mr. Johnson left the property and then you got in? How many days in between there roughly would you say that was?
I would say about 2 weeks.
Okay.
I didn't move into the property right away, and we did move into the house prior to moving the landscape business because I was somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I believe I moved in the property within 7 days of the closing date, but the landscape business was not running out of there fully for probably about 30 days. There was some stuff there the first weekend,
Okay.
a couple equipment that we don't use,
Yeah.
but we were not fully running out of there for about 30 days.
Okay, yeah, that's just important for the board to be aware of. There is this, for this use to be non-conforming, it needs to be continuous throughout its entire history. So I think that you can notice a small gap there, if it's however small it is. There was a stopping of the use for that short period of time. So one of the things that I think we kind of didn't really get into great detail is the fact that we don't have clarity on the zoning amendment or land use ordinance change that occurred that demonstrates that this was at one time permitted and allowed to be where it is. And I think that that's no fault of Ms. Voigt. I think that it's just really difficult to track down these historical zoning records. It's a difficult thing to prove when you can't find the information, but it's important to have that information to obtain the request that is being asked tonight. So I think that's an important note as well.
Can I ask a point of clarification on that?
What's that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so this has been on my mind for a while here. So if this were to have been approved from a zoning perspective in 1990,
Yeah.
would it have required a D variance in 1990?
So that's where it depends.
Yeah. That's what we don't
Basically,
know.
what we don't know is that there could have been a zoning ordinance in 1990 that permitted a mixed-use development with a single-family home and use in the backyard. There could have been that. We don't know. That is the burden of the applicant to demonstrate to the board. It doesn't appear that those records even exist. So that's a challenge for sure, but an important aspect of the request.
Ms. Voigt, you said you looked for those records?
So, yes, we did a public records request of the township for everything that had occurred, and we got everything in the township's records. As you see, going through the representations that a zoning permit issued came out of comments made in these records by the zoning officer as well as the clerk. So although we didn't find one to permit, they said that one had issued a zoning permit and a construction permit. And also, the ordinance 9212 specifically refers to construction permits, stating that nothing in this chapter shall require any change to the construction permit, which was approved before the enactment of the chapter. So,
But
Yeah.
doesn't that seem to
Zoning.
reference, provided that the construction shall have been started in 1 year of the effective date? So doesn't it seem like that ordinance is referring to if you don't start your construction with 1 year of the effective date, then your relief is void?
I'm looking for, not construction, I'm looking for zoning. What was the zoning law then?
Yes.
That,
But at
right.
least,
So the township has not been able to produce that.
okay.
Has not been able to produce the zoning ordinances at the time. But the record indicates that it existed and was allowed to continue to exist in this way. So, if we have to use circumstantial evidence here to demonstrate that the township has basically assented to this use, permitted this use since 1990, that's the best evidence that we have. So it may be our burden, but we're offering evidence that it was in fact allowed to exist. And
And-
we don't have any evidence refuting that.
Just for clarity, the evidence is the township clerk saying that it was permitted, but she can't produce any documents
The
that
building,
show
the
that.
building permit was issued,
Yeah,
and the tax assessor acknowledged it. And then in our later references, there's comments in these documents, even the zoning permit issued to Mr. Monahan, I believe, said township records demonstrate that this was previously approved. We could revisit that, it would be Exhibit 1, and I think there were comments on that. Let me pull that up. The zoning permit issued to Mr. Monahan states, received documentation showing that a landscaping business was granted permission to operate along with a permit for a pole barn to store landscaping equipment and materials, along with zoning approval. So that's stated in this. Now, I don't know if he took the originals, and so when I did my public records request, they weren't there. I can't solve the mystery, but I can tell you that your zoning officer represented that he received documentation showing that a landscape business was granted permission to operate along with a permit for a pole barn to store landscape equipment and materials along with zoning approval.
Can you remind me what you're reading?
I'm looking at Exhibit 1,
Exhibit 1, thank you.
and these would be
Right
the
there in the notes.
comments that are in your computer system as I understand this document.
Who was the zoning officer at the time?
This is a different, so the current zoning officer is not the zoning officer who handled
Who was
this.
the zoning officer at the time? Do you
Rod-
have a name?
Rodzniak.
Steve Rod something.
Rodzia?
Rodzanek.
And we
No, I'm spelling that.
we employed him as a sub of, he was
he was
not a
employed by
sub, but a,
in West Amwell.
yeah.
Yeah,
He
he was
shared.
We had a shared
The
services
shared services
agreement with
agreement.
West Amwell.
Yeah.
Okay. How many acres is this property?
I believe like 4.8 or 4.9.
415.
And there's no question that this property is in the agricultural zone.
Correct. I'm surrounded by.
Are there any other businesses near this property?
There is a construction company that I believe is 4 or 5 doors down, and then the other way there's a plumbing company, there is a septic company, and then there's another excavating company. I don't know where the town border is, so I don't know if they're in this town or not.
Are they
Within
in
the
East
zone?
Amwell?
I don't think so.
I know the construction company is, and there is a septic company in East Amwell. I don't know the address.
What do you mean by a septic company?
They do septics in people's backyards. They're an excavating company. So if you need a septic, they have excavators and trucks and trailers to
Maybe we should have
replace your
address
septic.
be more specific, because that could be different zone. It
Yes.
could be different town. I think that's something, we assume or we seen it. Maybe if we have precise information, the address, because it's hard to believe that there would be so many businesses within residential,
Is this,
It's- I don't
this,
think so.
it has been, I've lived here for 42 years. It's my understanding that it is residential This is
And agricultural.
what?
Agricultural.
Yep.
Right.
It's that's the zone, yeah, so that's what's
It's
permitted in
zone
the zone.
residential.
Yeah.
Yes,
The only businesses that were permitted, my recollection is there is an ordinance that permitted you to take a barn that was 75 years or older and convert it into either an antique shop or a bed and breakfast.
yes, so,
Very restricted use.
In AVAC.
yes, so that's what we're here to determine, right? So I think everyone understands that the use that's right now the landscaping business is not permitted as it currently stands, right? What we're here to determine tonight, and what the applicant is requesting, is that that use, right, the landscaping business, was once permitted lawfully, and they have been continuing that since the ordinance has changed, right? So that's what we're trying, we know that the use is not permitted, that's not a question here tonight. That will only become an issue if a variance is necessary down the road, once we make determinations tonight or subsequent hearings.
I have a question. So if you move, I moved to this town 4 years ago. If I would move and I want to have a business, and let's say I would buy property and there would be barn on the back, maybe antiqued. And let's say I would definitely make whatever possible to talk to a town and make sure if I move in, that my business is legal, that even if its previous owner operated, how do I know that my business would be okay? I can't assume, I don't know if that's really, we can call grandfathering business. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
I understand.
it's a new owner and it's your business, and I understand that's what you do for a living. I would be very cautious to assume things. You know, I will go right away to a town and say, who do I speak with? How do I know? What kind of document I have to obtain to make sure that I could operate, and nobody, of the neighbors gonna give me a hard time.
What is your
So,
question?
Yeah, what's
so
your
my
question?
question, my comment is, I didn't get any idea that's, you have such a document that you from the town, that this is my business, I move in and I want to continue, despite, forget even the previous owner, there is a storage building existing, right? And it did operate. I do miss a picture of the current site. And I look on a Google, it's quite involved. The site that you're operating on, I think it's exceeded what was in 2022. So
What is this based upon?
What's the question?
The question is this, that I don't see I don't understand, quite frankly, how we base this, that you can have a business. You a new owner of the house, right, you purchase, and there was also business, landscaping slash farm, right, storage. And that I don't understand. So you assume that you can continue with your landscaping business, right?
Are you asking me if I assume that to continue?
Yeah,
You keep
there's
saying I
any
understand and it's
documents,
confusing.
any town, if this town issue any legal documents that you can do the business?
When I purchased the property, I spoke directly to Fred Johnson, who was the one who was not the property owner at the time in 2022, but he was the one running the business. He had handed me paperwork that said which follows up with our Oprah request, that says he filed a construction permit to build the 40 by 100 metal pole barn for his
Right, I
landscape and
understand
farm
that,
equipment storage.
right.
And then along with that, I filed an Oprah with Linda. This is after I moved in and I was unsuccessful. She said, from what I'm told, the basement of the building flooded years ago and she was not able to find a lot of documents. I found very few. All I was able to go off of was that construction permit that stated that he was going to use the 40 by 100 metal pole barn for his landscape and farm equipment storage. So that's
But
all
they
I
was
had
on
to
the
go off
name of the previous owner, right?
of. Two previous owners, Fred Johnson,
Right.
in 1990s when he pulled that construction permit for the metal building.
Mr.
Okay.
Monahan, did you consider, on this where it says it advised you to get a letter from the Board of Adjustment recognized the pre-existing. Did you talk to the zoning board or consider filing something at that point with the zoning board just to ensure that this was all legit?
I was going to, and I've been a landscape business full-time. I work 80 hours a week, and we were working on it. And I came in a few times, I talked to Linda, and she gave me a couple of pieces of paper of who to talk to, who to email. I had a few phone calls, I don't remember who they were. I know I did, at the time, was speaking to the planning board secretary, but she was out on maternity. So but I believe the dates lined up.
I think we didn't have one for a little while, but I
Maybe
understand what
there
you're
was some confusion of, I don't know who to tell you, and I was waiting. And I also went through constant emails and a headache with the neighbors complaining about the truck parts business. I just kind of wanted to step back and just like take it easy for a little bit. And then when we started in the winter, I was going to do it. And before I even had the chance to go any further is when I got the violation. And then I came in here the next day and spoke with Kristen about what to do. And we were, in words, she said we were going to figure this out together. So it was a whole packet of what we were going to do.
Yeah.
The packet was several inches thick.
And you hired me.
Yeah, I looked at it and I ain't doing this.
And you've testified that the zoning officer had been telling you you could have truck parts there so long as they weren't visible from the street,
Yeah,
correct?
he never said anything to me about you can't have the business here, you can't sell out of here. He said in an email, he said to me, I don't want to see it, put it inside, out of sight, per township code. So
And that was the truck parts.
that was the truck parts, and I in that similar month time frame is when I filed for the zoning permit, as well as the fence permit, as well as the zoning permit for the retaining wall, with Steve.
And he issued you for the landscape business, correct?
Correct.
So after you hired me, we reviewed this together, and I advised you that the truck parts business should not continue there despite what the zoning officer said. Is that correct?
Yes, nobody from the town ever told me that I was not able to run my truck parts business out of the property. They only gave me a violation for abandoned vehicles, for junkyard, and unoperable vehicles, just for the storage.
Can we just pause for a second?
Yes.
And figure out what that noise is?
I've been
Distracting.
hearing it
Sorry.
actually. I've been hearing
It's really
it off and on
distracting.
since we
That's coming out of
started.
here.
Have
It's
you?
that speaker.
Is that, okay.
It's,
Do we have a phone near it? Maybe we get the feedback? It's distracting,
My phone's on.
especially at 9 o'clock at night.
I've found it distracting too.
It's getting, as it gets later, it gets more distracting.
I can try that plug, but I'm nervous that it might not work afterwards.
It sounds like it just stopped, but.
It comes and goes. It
Okay.
just got louder. It's
Yeah,
been doing it a little quieter all night.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Did, this piece of property obviously is a problematic piece of property in terms of many things. The property itself, the 4.5 acres we got, and including a tremendous amount of it is impervious coverage of the property. I mean, I'm looking at 2 acres of
Has that ever-
asphalt.
Has that been raised as an
What?
issue before? Okay.
And if it hasn't been, if it was not, if it was lawful and non-conforming, and it has not been changed in any way, right? And if, the impervious has changed since what's permitted, it can continue so long as it has not expanded.
We don't know anything other than that a metal frame building was put in. We don't know when 3 acres of, let me get it correct, almost 2 acres of asphalt were put down all around the pole barn building. I don't see any permits for 2 acres of asphalt paving. I mean, the property is a mess. The property is, in terms of the use that's been made of this property. Now, I'm not blaming him. He didn't do it. But I mean, the idea that you can rely upon someone who is, there were certainly no permits for paving half the property over. There's certainly, the only permit you have is for a pole barn. I mean, we'd
may I
let
ask you-
anybody put a pole barn up.
Mr. Khanna, I would like to stick to asking questions, and then when we get to the point where we're debating, then we can have this conversation, if you don't mind.
So I'd
I'm gonna
like
ask-
to know what the equitable estoppel is. What's equitable about it? And why should we,
that's a-
what, I mean, he bought a piece of property, I don't know what he paid for it, but I assume he didn't pay a premium for, you know, for the shape of that this property was in, a junkyard, basically, when he bought it.
I don't believe there's any testimony in the record that there was a junkyard there when he purchased it. We demonstrated a aerial photograph that occurred at the time right before closing where it was completely clear, and aerial photographs going back to, I believe, 1995, which showed, you know, this equipment of this kind of nature.
When I say a junkyard, lots of vehicles, lots and lots of vehicles, apparently, many of them inoperable.
I don't believe we can answer.
It was a storage yard. How's that?
If you could point to the evidence in the record of that, it would be helpful in my response, because I don't believe we have provided any.
That's what I'm hearing from the neighbors. Are they lying about this?
That was
Let's-
after I purchased the property is when they were complaining. When I purchased the property, there was no complaint to them aware about unoperable vehicles. That was after I purchased the property, and after those complaints were received, I was issued a zoning violation, and then the zoning officer, Stephen, he had then come a couple months later, and he walked the property during daylight hours and said that I was clear.
Because of your other business.
Yeah, there is no unoperable vehicles for the landscape business, which is
I
what I'm
said
appealing.
because of your other business that you were running, you were getting complaints from your neighbors.
Yes, every complaint that I have been able to find was regarding the truck parts business, which is the violation that I received, I believe, May of 2023.
So, Mr. Kadechi, is your question about the equitable relief here
Yes.
also relevant to putting aside the junkyard, the factual issue of the junkyard? Is that also relevant to the relief that the applicant is seeking regarding the landscaping business? Is that also relevant to that issue tonight? Yes. Is
Yes.
it? Okay, so, Mr. Catenacci, you can rephrase your question. I don't want to make the question for you, but putting aside the factual issue of the junkyard, per the word that we're using, putting that aside, but what we're discussing tonight, the landscaping business, continuation of the landscaping business. Mr. Catenacci's question seems to be, is an explanation of the equitable estoppel and how that applies to the landscaping business.
Yes, I am not seeking any approval for the truck parts business. All I'm appealing is the zoning violation for the landscape business. It has absolutely nothing to do with the truck parts business or all the unoperable vehicles or all those codes and chapters that they got about that. This has nothing to do with any of that.
So I think the question is more, I don't want to
But, go ahead.
overstate your question, but I think it's a legal question maybe for counsel.
Yeah.
If
Well,
that's
it's a legal
correct.
question. I want to know what the
Yeah.
equitable estoppel argument is. What is the factual basis for the application of the doctrine of equitable estoppel?
So in this case, the premise that we are putting forward is.
I'm sorry?
In this case, the premise that we are putting forward is that the zoning permit was correctly issued. The zoning permit that was issued in May was correctly issued in that it basically confirmed the continuation of a previously existing permitted use. Okay, basically grandfathered use, so I avoid the use of that term, okay? And so if the neighbors who were in the process of, specifically, especially Mr. Kirchner, was in the process of attempting to, he was corresponding with the township. We've got that evidence in the record. He's corresponding with the township, complaining just about the truck parts business, which has been discontinued at the property as per Mr. Monahan's testimony and as per the confirmation in the emails with the zoning officer. So the idea that, so that is off the table. The concern you complain of having stored parts is off the table.
I understand that.
So returning to the landscaping business, it's a separate issue. A zoning permit was issued, and it was correct. But, and the zoning officers.
Excuse me, when you say the zoning permit, it was correct.
It was correctly issued. That is our premise. The zoning permit that was issued in May of 2023 was correctly issued. He confirms in the permit that there were records in the township that he basically put into his note saying that a zoning permit had issued and that there were approvals for it, and that
He could not have, he had to have made it up.
we don't have any evidence of that. I mean,
We don't have any evidence that we don't have any evidence, right, that anything was done by the township formally, other than allowing a pole barn.
your zoning officer put into the record that a zoning approval had been issued. We also have an actual copy of the UCC permits, and it is in
No, you
those
have a
public
permit
records.
You have a permit for a pole barn. You don't have a
I
permit for a
am
business.
trying to
going in
answer your
circles here.
question about equitable
I think we're going in
estoppel.
circles here, though.
I am trying to
So
answer
yeah,
the
Ms. Law,
question.
if you want to answer that, and then if the board has any other questions, I will let Mr. Davis finish his comments, Mr. O'Brien go, and then we want to open up to the public.
So equitable estoppel would apply if there was a rescission of the zoning permit after 20 days inappropriately.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Does anyone else from the board have a quick question?
I have
before
a
we go?
couple of questions. One is about the parking area. It looks like it was expanded at some point. Do you have any, from this to this?
When are the two
This was the
surveys?
1991, and this was this was the most recent?
Yeah, the most recent one was, if I'm correct, we're looking at, that was after the retaining wall was put up on the, I believe, the west side of the property.
Yeah, the retaining wall's
Yeah,
over here.
So that went a little bit wider there, and then when the other survey is in 1990, you said?
Yes, this is the 19.
And it is stone, so I guess over the years, like a stone driveway tends to get wider and wider and wider versus a blacktop driveway is hard.
Yeah,
So
because-
it can't move.
Is there all stone back there, or is
There-
there blacktop, or
there's
is
all
there
s-
any paving?
There's all stone except for against the wall, there's about a 20 by 50 blacktop pad that is used to store the two types of mulch on.
And is that new?
That's within, I put that in since I bought the property in June 2022.
Yeah, because this one shows that the parking area does not impinge on the drainage, where this one shows the parking area does impinge on what was called here the conservation easement, which is one of the questions. When I looked today, I could see it's right up to where it goes straight down to the creek.
Correct, and I'm actually currently working with New Jersey DEP.
I was wondering,
To fix
I
that.
wanted to ask you about
I've-
that.
Emailing her is kind of hard. I email her and I get a response back 3-4 weeks later. She has made 2 site visits. The first site visit, there was still a little bit of snow in the ground, and she said that she wanted to come back when there was no snow so she could make an accurate decision. She then came back. I was not there, but she sent me an email saying that she looked at it. She was to talk to a few of her bosses and then get back to me. I have yet to hear back from her, and she flat told me, she goes, "This is not an urgent issue for me. I have much more important things. The only reason I am here is because we are getting constant complaints about this, and I'm doing my due diligence to fulfill those needs."
Okay. The other question I had is you've made an assumption that the reason that the permit was rescinded was because of all the complaints. Do we have any evidence of that?
I've provided you all of the evidence that we could possibly provide, so you can
Have you talked to the zoning officer? Did the zoning officer confirm that that's the reason? Or might there be another reason that the permit was rescinded?
We have filed a bunch of Oprahs to try and find the reason why, and have found nothing. I've sent several emails to Stephen as well. I think her name is Gail. She's the construction
Gail
officer.
Fruely.
She's the one who gave me. She does all the paperwork for Stephen, and I sent an email of why did I get a permit? Or why did I get a violation? No response.
Did you have any discussions with the zoning officer about the neighbors complaining to him?
He
Did he-
said that they were very brutal, and that is why he was on my tail for the, for the truck parts business. For the landscape business, he flat out told me I had no complaints. All of the complaints just came from the truck parts business.
But he still rescinded the permit,
Yes, and
the
I-
use permit.
Correct, and I've yet to get a solid answer of why. And my main question from her was day one is, why do I have a violation? I'm sitting here today and I couldn't tell you why I got a violation for the landscape business.
With respect to Ms. Wiggins' questions about the drainage easement, again, you testified that at the time of purchase, you did not know there was a conservation easement nor a drainage easement there, correct?
Correct, I had no idea.
And you have since walked the property with the NJDEP representative, correct?
Yes.
And you intend to pull that back within the original line?
She said that in 2007 they passed a law, so wherever any stone or building or material was in 2007, anything after that has to be pulled back. So as soon as I hear from New Jersey DEP of what I have to pull back, I will pull back.
Okay.
I have yet to hear back from her. I was actually trying to get all of that taken care of before this meeting, but I don't want to nudge her too bad. I don't want to be a pain to her. I know she has other more important things that she has to do on her day-to-day basis.
The other thing about this map is it doesn't show, I drew it in, but it doesn't show the carport in the back of that building that comes out.
When that survey was done, there was no carport there.
Ah, so that's been added since this was done.
Yeah, I waited to put the carport up until I spoke to the zoning officer, and that's when he told me if there was 3 10-by-10 carports, you're only allowed the square footage. He said you could have 3 10-by-10, or you could have 1 30-by-30, and I currently have 1 30-by-30, so they cover the same square footage on the current stone base.
Okay.
Sorry, it would be 10 by 30, right? 3 10-by-10s is
Yes,
1 10-by-30.
sorry, yeah,
Yes.
Sorry, yeah, that's my fault.
Mr. Cohet, you had a question?
Yeah, so, Mr. Monahan, you testified that you have ended the truck business. I'm on the Enterprise New Jersey Business Records Service, and the RJM Truck Parts LLC is still an active business here.
Yes, that business, per my attorney asking me, we no longer operate that business out of 35 Rosemont Ringos Road.
So you operate this business elsewhere now?
Correct. It is no longer operated on this property.
But it's still registered there.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's,
the business is registered to this address. But we don't operate there, so I don't know if that's an issue or not.
So that's just the business registration for purposes
Yeah, so
of
I just get things in
legal
the mail.
documentation
Correct.
and
Yep.
service and things like that.
That's it. No customers come, no more customers come to the property for the truck parts business.
and no equipment comes to the property for the truck parts business?
There is no equipment for that.
I mean, but truck parts are
Inventory.
not no inventory is showing up on the property anymore.
Yeah, correct. No new inventory even comes in. All the vehicles that access my property currently are the landscape business or my personal vehicles.
Do you have any other questions?
I have one question, quick question. Do we have a current image, from NJ Web? Like we have 2022, do we have 2024, like your current business looks like?
They don't exist. Mr. Monahan would not know this, but as a land use attorney and real estate attorney, I look at these all the time. That data layer is not available. It's a
I
little
went
delayed.
on the Google map and I have couple images in color, so it looked like it's a little bit expanded now. That's the 2024 Google map.
Okay, so that's different than the official maps in NJ GeoWeb or Rowan.
Well, it's
putting that
reliable.
into evidence.
Yeah, I was curious. It's if you have any to compare. It's always good to see.
Yeah, I mean, we are discussing evidence not in the record.
And we have evidence, and to council's point, a lot of times with the aerial images, they are a little delayed for the formal websites, right? So I assume council has provided the most up-to-date that she could provide that's in her interest too, in her client's
Yeah.
interest to provide that.
Yeah, I would be happy to look at that. I don't know if it actually has confirmation of the date that that photo was taken, but I have not looked at a recent Google Earth image. I know we did look at Google Earth together, so I just don't, personally, I don't recall seeing an expansion, so I just don't know what you're referring to.
No, I have a map, so, no, just
Could-
asking
comparing
if,
it-
like,
It also could have been when the truck parts business was still there.
It could have been, and the date could, a few months could make a difference.
Yeah.
If the truck,
it
once
just
was
how it looks
removed.
very busy,
I-
expanded
is-
to the east. So that's why I'm asking. It's good to always compare,
I hear you.
2022, 2024.
And I think too, if that is a concern of the board, it's something that can be discussed, the public is here and they'll have the opportunity to speak, and
Sure.
evidence doesn't just have to be by picture, right? It can be by testimony, and personal knowledge of the site too. So it doesn't just have to be by image.
Do you have a question?
Just one fast question. On your business, you say you did your maintenance on your equipment there. What about your trucks? Do you do any oil changes on your trucks on your property?
We do oil changes that are done inside the building.
Okay, and where do you dispose of the oil? You take precautions for
We
spills?
take them to Advanced Auto Parts in Flemington, New Jersey, by the
Okay.
circle, and they take 5-gallon pails or 1-gallon jugs for free.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Codger, do you have any questions? Okay. Do you have anything more?
Yeah, Mr.
Um,
Davis.
Do you anticipate any sort of expansion from your landscaping business in the near future?
I do not.
No. Just for the board's note, it's becoming clear based on the surveys and imagery that we've looked at that there has been some expanded of parking areas. That's an important fact here. The intensity of the use has been increased based on 2 surveys provided. The carport, right? That was an addition or a replacement. Was it
It was a
carport
it
a
was-
replacement?
Yes, so
Okay.
there was 3 smaller ones and now there's 1 larger
Just
one.
one big one. Gotcha.
Correct.
Sorry, I sort of missed that a little bit. And then my one last question is, what is the relationship between the farming business and the landscaping business? Because that was something that I had not heard, that there was a farming business operating on the site, and that, to me, seems like you're asking to operate 2 farming trucks and a landscaping business out of the back of the site. And is there like a relationship between the farming and landscaping businesses? or-
Yes, for example, for the landscape business, a lot of the farmers, when they cut hay
Yeah.
along the edge of the fields, all the trees and everything usually gets surrounded by trees or
Yeah.
creeks. So we're hired by a lot of local farmers, because I have a piece of equipment, to brush hog the perimeter of that field.
Gotcha.
And what that does is that allows the farmers to maintain the same size
Yeah.
of the field, so that every year it doesn't get smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. And
I-
compatible uses, I just want to make sure I understood.
I don't want to interrupt you. I believe Ms. Deadwaller asked a question about that testimony. The testimony was that 2 of the trucks are registered to what is it, RJM?
RJM Farms is the legal LLC that they're registered under.
And those are the trucks you use for that particular part of the business? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Is it in any other way distinguishable from the landscaping business?
No, if I didn't tell you that they were different, you would never know.
So it's just a different aspect of your landscaping business, is that
Correct.
fair to say? It's
Yeah,
just,
if I
the
didn't-
vehicles are registered under a different legal entity.
Just for strictly different use for DEP and DOT regulations, they had to be registered a certain way, because if not, then that's a whole nother
Okay.
issue.
But it's different equipment for that.
The equipment is the same, I would say.
Okay.
One piece of equipment can be used for multiple things, based on different attachments that can go on the front or back of that machine.
Thank you. I just want to be clear.
Mr. Davis, do you have anything else?
That's all I have, thank you.
Mr. O'Brien, go ahead.
Excuse me just one moment. In
Yeah.
response to a point made by Mr. Davis that there was a small gap in time, you've provided testimony, correct, that you purchased this property with an intention to continue the landscaping business that had been done by Mr. Johnston, correct?
Correct.
And you actually spoke with Mr. Johnston about the landscaping business and got from him what he said was his paperwork showing that the landscaping business could be there, correct?
Yes, I felt that he was very helpful with purchasing the property, and he actually allowed me to walk through his building when it still had his equipment in it. Even I wasn't even supposed to, he was there, he was come and look. and we had several conversations, and still to this day, we have several text and phone call conversations.
And so there was never an intention to discontinue the landscaping business, correct?
Correct.
There was merely a very brief cessation during which time he moved out and you moved in.
Yeah, I had to move stuff to that location.
And I can pull your ordinance and read it, but I've never seen an ordinance that wouldn't allow a brief change of one person moving out and another person moving in and consider that any sort of an abandonment or an intent to discontinue a legally pre-existing non-conforming use. I've just never seen it. I don't think it's supported in the law in any way whatsoever that a brief change in ownership would be a discontinuation. And then additionally, you've provided testimony that you also occupy this business personally and that you have personal storage in the back as well, correct?
Correct. Some of the,
And this application pertains to the use of the building, correct?
correct.
It does not pertain to the structures. So with respect to the structures, specifically the pavement, there's a survey you've provided which shows pre-existing pavement, correct?
Correct.
And to the extent that that evolved over time, and which, if you take a look at that survey, if we could look at Mr. Johnston's survey, when you purchased the property, we're going to Exhibit 29, when you purchased the property, would you say that some of the expansion of the gravel and the parking occurred between the date of this survey and the date of your purchase?
Yes,
Okay.
without a doubt.
Without a doubt. Okay, so over time, you said the gravel naturally expanded. The area where you put down blacktop, you put that in an area where there is gravel?
Correct. There was previously gravel and stone
Okay.
where there is now blacktop.
So, and you testified that he testified to having a number of employees that would have been a more intensive use than yours, correct?
Correct.
And when you looked at the photographs of the trucks and equipment parked on site, do you have more landscaping-related trucks and equipment than is shown in those aerial photographs?
I have less landscaping trucks than the photographs at that time
Okay.
throughout the years.
Okay, and when you walked, scratch that.
Sorry.
And so with respect to the idea of an intensification as a result of the pavement, is it possible that that pavement is also related to your personal use of the property?
Correct.
Okay, and to the extent that there was any demonstrated necessity that you pull I'm saying pavement, I misspoke, I meant gravel. To the extent that there was any necessity that the gravel be pulled back, whether by this board or by the NJDEP, is it your intention to pull that gravel back?
Of course.
And is the extent of that gravel at all related to the intensity of your actual landscape use operations?
No.
Okay, and do you require gravel beyond what is shown in this survey in order to operate your landscape business operations?
I do not.
And counsel, I have a couple questions before we move on to public comment. So is it true that there's a residential home and the landscaping business on this property?
Yes.
Yes. Was there ever a variance granted or any other type of land use approval for two principal uses on one lot?
Not that I'm aware of.
Could you provide any testimony regarding whether the residential home and the pole barn were present at the time of the ordinance change? Because pursuant to the land use code in the township, you can only have one principal use on a lot. So do you know when the home was constructed? I assume before the pole barn in 1990, right?
He lived there before 1990, so I
So the
assume
residential home
house
was first,
there.
yeah.
Correct.
So, and we aren't aware of any of approvals around 1990. I guess it would be to allow two principal uses on one lot. We are not aware of that.
We've provided the approvals that were granted at the time as per the public records, as well as reference to a zoning permit that was supposedly also granted at the time.
Okay,
That is all that we have.
Okay, so council, would you agree as part of this application, it's also necessary that the non-conforming use also has to include two principal uses on the lot?
Yes.
Okay, just to make clear.
Thank
It's
you.
all really wrapped up in one question, but I want to make
It
clear that for the record.
really is. We haven't actually itemized the deviations from the code since that time in terms of two principal uses and listing what's available in the zone. We do have planning testimony that I think will be very helpful to where this questioning is starting to go, But yes, to answer your
Okay,
question.
I just want to make sure before we moved on to public comment, and we were on a little bit of planning stuff.
I want to let Mr. O'Brien.
Yep, I was going to go right to Mr. Ryan.
Thank you. Let's see. Do you have a name of the person you've been talking to at DEP? Or you have an email, you have some kind of correspondence from that representative that's been to your property?
I think I forwarded you information.
All right, you have that, so you can give that to the board, just so we know
Of course. Yep.
who you're talking to there.
There was, actually, the person I'm currently working with is a female, and she's the one that's regarding the creek in the back. And then there was another gentleman, his first name was Chris, who's actually this lady's boss, that I spoke with when I pulled a permit for a fence and a retaining wall in the back.
Right, that,
If you looked at all the information, that you saw that his email of he was waiting for their approval, they weren't sure of the setbacks.
that's what I was gonna ask you. I
Yeah,
saw
so
that in the
that was
documentation.
that was Chris.
Chris
uh,
Squazzo, most likely.
Yes, Chris.
yeah.
Yes, and I guess that is
So-
the boss of the lady that I'm working with now.
So for the board, it's a tributary to the Third Neshannock River. So it's a blue line stream, so it has a riparian zone on it.
Okay.
Could be 50 feet either side, could be 150. So that's what the DEP will tell you.
Correct.
That's what they're going to look at, how much impervious cover you've got to not only pull it back, but return it to pervious, lawn, et cetera.
Yes, at once
So-
she was going to let me know that once I pull it out, there might have to be rehabilitation. I have to
Yes.
plant certain type of
Exactly.
grass or
You're gonna have to
trees or shrub.
restore that
Correct.
buffer.
Yep.
Because again, that is protecting that water, and everything's regulated by the DEP. So that's good that you're talking with them. Have you ever removed any trees on the property yourself?
There was trees at the front of the property.
Okay.
There was one small tree, and then there was a pine tree that got struck by lightning. And then in the back of the property, there was arborvitae that we removed. I think 4 of them on the one side, the deer were eating the bottom,
Okay.
and that was part of the retaining wall, because the deer were eating the bottoms, they were all dead,
Right.
and that was all part of the washout. So when we did the wall, we took them down and put the wall up due to the permit.
So on the south side of the southeast side, have you expanded that gravel in any way for truck parking or equipment parking or?
Nothing for the truck part. I think there was one tree that fell. The arborvitae are very tall and skinny, and when you get snow, the snow waits on them and they fall. So there is some that were planted, but then I actually planted, I think it was 7 more trees that I planted.
So you haven't trucked in any additional gravel yourself and cleared any additional parking for trucks, equipment, or anything like that?
No.
On your, okay.
On the southeast.
Or anywhere on the property? I mean,
The
put down new gravel anywhere?
The only new gravel that was put down was on top of the old gravel where there's
Potholes or something?
whatever.
filling?
And then when we did the retaining wall, a lot of that got dug up, so we put new gravel down so that there was no mud, because
Okay.
it all washed out during one rainstorm.
And then when was the 10 by 30 carport installed, would you say? Last year?
Last year.
Last year sometime.
During the summer,
Okay.
about a year ago. It was actually installed right after I received the permit for the landscape business, which was May 15th, I believe. That's when I was emailing Steven Rosnick.
And how he
very
said to
frequently,
do.
And that's how he told me it has to be within the same measures.
So you bought the property when?
June of 2022.
And you applied for that landscape permit
May.
a year later?
Yes.
Why a year later? Is it just a
Because
matter of you?
I was working with him on a fence permit and a couple other things, and that's what he instructed me to do. He goes, pull a permit for the wall, the fence. The fence I already did, that's no brainer, and landscape business. He told me to do that. I filed the form, I paid the $50 or $75 fee, and then within, I think, 10 days later, I was granted a zoning permit.
For that use?
Correct.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
I'm going to open it up to the public for questions. I'm going to ask that anyone who lives within 200 feet of the property go first, and then we'll go on to the next ones. So we need a motion, though, sorry. Yeah.
Everyone will get the chance to speak who
Everyone
wants to
will get
speak,
a chance
though.
to speak, but I want to give that courtesy. May I have a motion to open to the public?
So moved.
So moved.
You can think. Who seconded it? Okay. All in favor?
No motion.
Okay.
Okay, we're open to the public. This is for questions to this witness for people who live within 200 feet of the property.
And just a reminder, I know we're on our first witness, but if we start to get repetitive and make some of the same comments, we will just give a friendly reminder just for time purposes.
And just for television viewing,
Yes.
is there a microphone our witnesses can use?
Probably one of the professionals or probably the professionals might go.
I think we put it up here last time. It worked out.
Yes, and we made the public stand,
come up here,
if it's
yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
Right up here.
Come on up.
Tell me what the procedure is.
So
I'll tell
come
you.
up- Go ahead, you go ahead.
I'll tell you. So what I'll do is ask for your name and whether or not you are an East Amwell resident, and then I will swear you in, and then you are free to go. Okay?
And at this point, we're just asking direct questions
Just,
of
Mr.
Mr.
Monahan.
Monahan about the testimony already presented.
Absolutely.
No new evidence yet, no.
We're only limiting this cross-examination to testimony that's already been provided, just Mr. Monahan. What?
I'm sorry, could you please?
So we're just-
Robert Kirshner. Okay.
Okay.
Robert Kirshner, 138 Boss Road. My property is contiguous to Mr. Monahan. I'm the infamous
Yes.
Mr. Kirshner.
So, Mr. Kirshner, can I please swear you in?
Sure.
Can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and now you can continue. Just remember, it's just about the testimony that Mr. Monahan gave tonight.
Okay.
Go ahead.
There's so much here, I don't know how you sort fact from fiction. But I'm going to try and paint a pattern for you. I knew Fred Johnston for 30 years. And I know he had a construction permit. Never had a zoning permit. He ran a small business. He was an ethical man. No one complained. It's curious that Mr. Monahan runs a landscaping business, but he waited a full year before he had a survey. A full year. He maintains that he moved the returning wall, which also has like these bins, huge blocks. You're welcome to do a site visit. I know you're entitled to do a site visit. Seeing is believing. Nothing's been moved. Nothing has been moved. He put up these structures without a permit. His survey shows that the structures were there before he applied for a permit. There's a pattern here, folks. I will give you a wetlands determination study. I work as a consultant in schools, but I also have been a realtor for 35 years. I subdivided 10 years ago. I'm going to give you the study. The stream starts on my property. It goes into his property. It's considered wetlands. There's a 50-foot buffer on either side. I contacted the DEP. I'll give you documentation. He's under investigation. He's violated the wetlands. The pattern here is that Mr. Monahan pretty much does what he plans to do. That, and then deals with whatever happens later. I have great concerns that he's not Fred Johnston. He's running much more than a landscaping business. If he were Fred Johnston, I wouldn't be here now. This business doesn't belong where it's at. He's nestled between two homes and two farms, mine and the Stahl farm. I would recommend, I'll close with this, there's so much more that I could say, but you've got a lot on your plate. I would recommend that you go out and see what we are dealing with here. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Kirshner?
Council, do you have any response? I'll give you the opportunity to respond while it's fresh.
I do appreciate that. That was in the form of testimony and not questioning.
Well, it's public comment too. So.
And public comment. I will note that in all of the correspondence that we provided, there was no production of a wetland study. I will note that, let me just take a look at what he had to say. He says there's no zoning permit. I don't know how he would know that or not know that.
Is there a zoning permit?
We have reference to a zoning permit in correspondence from the clerk to him, as well as a reference to a zoning permit in the actual, earlier zoning permit and the actual record that was provided to Mr. Monahan, on which he relies. So, you know, we're talking about the representation of the clerk and the zoning officer compared to the neighbor who
Understood.
doesn't like that he's not Mr. Johnston. Just give me a moment. I think the evidence speaks for itself. I have no further comment about what he has said.
Good evening. My name is Maria Kowali.
Ms.
I live at
Kowali.
33 Rosemont Ringos Road.
So you are an East Amwell resident?
Yes, I am.
Okay, just double
Proud of it.
checking.
We've
Okay.
been in East
And
Am.
Ms. Qualley, can I please?
I'm sorry?
Can I please swear you in?
Yes,
Can you please raise your right hand?
right here. Sorry.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And how do you spell your name?
Kowali, Kiwalley.
And what's your first name?
Maria.
Okay, go ahead.
And
Ms.
my
Qualley.
husband and I have lived in East Amwell since 1990. We've known Fred for many years before he moved out, and then we knew Arlie, and Fred had the business in the barn continuing. So, you know, we've seen the trucks, the landscaping go by. When Bobby bought the place, we really haven't seen that much of a difference from where we are. He's actually enhanced the property. He's made the front yard much, much nicer. He's put trees in the back. We are not one of the neighbors that have issues with him. We like to stay on good terms with everyone, and he's been very pleasant with us. So we have no issues with it. Any questions?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Counsel?
No, thank you.
Hi, my name is Bruce Harms. I reside in East Amwell at 37 Rosemont Ringos Road.
Mr. Arms, can you, yep, I will swear you in. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to start by reminding Mr. Monahan what happened shortly after he arrived at that location. The road was repaved. The pilings were dropped off in his location. I saw several trucks drop them off. That explains why there's the expansion. I don't have a problem with it if he cleans it up. My biggest other problem with him has been the noise and the business regarding to his truck parts. He has stopped that. I assume he's not going to put anything in there because it was very noisy. I was constantly hearing machinery, pneumatic tools, banging. One point in time, it was loud enough that my sister-in-law, who was visiting us, eating dinner in our dining room, asked, "What is that noise?" Mr. Monahan agrees that he's really stopped the truck
business, I don't think I'm gonna have a problem with that either. I'd like to get back on good terms with him. I understand, as he's pointed out, we've got a trespassing problem. Well, I'd like to talk to him about that later. As for the landscaping business, I've never really had a problem. My emails were purely against the business he has. My concern is he may start another business that's gonna be noisy and loud. That's what I have to say about this at this point.
I'm sorry, could you restate that? My client asked me a question. What was the last point you made, your concern?
My concern is that there may be more businesses put on that place that are loud, noisy, and have a lot of traffic going in and out.
Was the noise that your sister or sister-in-law was referring to the truck parts business?
Yes.
And that noise is no longer occurring?
I have not heard it in about a month or two. So yes, I'm pointing out that if he's gonna stop the truck business as he has stated, I'm okay with it. Although I did ask, does he remember having the pilings deposited in his property?
I remember a few of the, I assume you mean the millings, the ground
Yes.
up? Yes, they dumped a few of those millings on my property.
Is this the county?
This is, it was hired as a county project, I think it's a county road.
Yes.
But the contractor was hired by the county, was the one, their trucks or their hired trucks were the ones that dumped the millings on my property, and a lot of them actually were dumped near the wall. When you come down the driveway on the right, where the drain wall was put up, that's where a lot of them were put, just because we kept finding muds, we just ended up filling it in.
I just wanted to clarify where those gravel came from, so you're aware of it.
Yeah, some of them actually went up in my driveway in the front.
Was this at your request, or was this against your knowledge? I'm confused by this.
What do you mean?
I have no idea.
Why
All
did
I
they
know
dump
is-
it there?
Yeah, why did they dump it there?
They were looking for a spot to dump them, and
Okay.
the county reached out. They actually put a sign in front of them, and there was the county inspector. And it was his phone number, along with the job site supervisor, had both of their cell phone numbers on there, as they were looking for a spot to dump some of these millings. I know they dumped them. I don't know. I can't. It was a month-long project. I don't know where they all went, but I did take a few of the loads.
That's all.
Anyone have any questions?
Counsel?
Are you willing to have the discussions with him that he has asked to have with you after this matter?
Of course.
Okay.
Thank you.
Rick?
Rick Wolf, 21 Rynearson Road, about a stone's
Mr.
throw
Wolf,
from
can I
this
just swear
property.
you in?
Yes,
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Good, Mr. Wolf.
I'm around the corner from his property. I'm not within the 200 feet, but I'm around the corner. My wife and I have a 139-acre farm, and I regularly drive by his property. I'm going to start by clearing away some underbrush, and then I'll get into some points. I'm going to start with the infamous case that seems to have been taking up a lot of time. I believe counsel for the applicant has grossly overplayed her hand on this case, and if I say anything that's wrong, let me know. And just for full disclosure, I've been practicing law for 37 years, so I've read a few cases in my time. The case she's referring to, which I haven't read until tonight, but I just pulled it up on Google, involved a person who went in and got a building permit to build a house. And the neighbor was disgruntled about the building permit and complained. And 5 months later, the neighbor's attorney filed a complaint with the Zoning Board of Adjustment to have the building permit overturned. There is a rule that says that if you want to file a complaint with a zoning board of adjustment to have a permit overturned, you have to do it within 20 days. That's not what's happening here. Mr. Karshner didn't file a complaint with the zoning board of adjustment to have the zoning officer's decision overturned. The zoning officer overturned the decision on his own. The applicant is filing an application to have the zoning officer's determination overturned. That's not what this case is about. And by the way, at the very end, the court makes it clear that this case is limited to those facts. We have no occasion here to determine whether plaintiff's reliance on the building permit issued by the borough zoning officer would serve to insulate her right to construct the structure from direct or collateral attack. That's not the issue presented by this case. We merely hold that Visolis, that was the disgruntled neighbor, challenge to the issuance of the building permit constituted an appeal brought beyond the limitations period provided by, and they quote the statute, the 20 days. The court is saying it's limited to that situation and not to other facts. So counsel is grossly overplaying her hand on this case. She's expanding it far beyond the parameters of this case. This doesn't involve a complaint by Mr. Karshner or anybody else to the zoning board to have a zoning officer's decision overturned. The zoning officer overturned his own decision. This involves a complaint by the homeowner. So let's clear that away. Okay, now let's start. I'm going to ask a few questions to the applicant. Is it pronounced Moynihan?
Monahan.
Monahan?
Yes, sir.
Did you know Mr. Johnston before you bought the farm? Or before you bought your property?
I met Mr. Johnson 5-6 months actually at Wawa in Flemington because him and I had worked on similar HOA communities in the town of Flemington.
But you two are not friends? Long-term friends?
No, to this day, 2.5 years.
Okay, a lot of the testimony tonight involved your counsel or you reciting what you were told by Mr. Johnston. In fact, a significant part of your case revolves around what you were told by Mr. Johnston. I believe that's all hearsay.
I also received information from one of his, I would say, foreman, who also lives on Boss Road.
Okay, more hearsay.
Mr. Wolf, and I just do want to make sure the board is clear, is that the formal rules of evidence don't necessarily apply in a land use hearing.
I
While they can
understand.
consider the reliability of evidence, the formal hearsay rules and whether we're dealing with that, it's not.
No, and I
We're not bound by
understand.
that. So I just want to make
But-
sure the board was clear while we're discussing
But
this.
we all agree it's hearsay,
Yes. for the-
correct?
If we're doing a rules of evidence analysis, yes, but
Okay. And we don't have Mr. Johnston here to cross-examine, to
You do not.
determine whether this hearsay is true or not.
and that's up to the board to determine if
Right.
they want to
We just
take that as
have-
reliable evidence.
We trust this board's discretion when it comes to credibility issues, and Mr. Monahan was clear that he was reporting his conversations with Mr. Johnston, so you can take it at face value.
Right, but we just have a recitation by the interested party, the party who is seeking the approval here of what he was told. Mr. Johnston could have been brought in tonight to testify. He's not here.
Where does Mr. Johnston currently live?
Correct. He lives in Delaware, about a little over 2 hours away, and he works for a full-time landscape construction company that install $1 million pools in people's backyards, and he's one of the top guys. So trying to get this gentleman to come to a meeting at 7 p.m. on a work night when he has work the next day at 7 o'clock wasn't feasible for him.
Okay, but I traveled almost 2 hours to get here today also, and I work 70, 80-hour weeks, but I hear what you're saying, but he's not here.
Yeah, I can't
So we
speak
have
for-
nothing to support your statements. What I also find interesting, and I'm going to try to take this in a coherent way, but I jotted down a bunch of notes with little stars, and I'm going to try to present this somewhat coherently. What we have is a construction permit. We don't have a zoning permit. Well, what does that mean? Well, when I built my house on my farm, first I had to go in and get zoning approval. Basically, get the zoning officer to say, hey, Rick, you can build the house that you want to build off the plans that you presented. You could put it where you want on the lot. It's within the setbacks, et cetera. Your house satisfies our zoning ordinance. Once I get that zoning permit, then I go to construction and I get permits to do the foundation, the framing, et cetera. Those construction permits do not bless the zoning.
But
I-
don't
Miss-
they assume, what you just outlined was that zoning comes first and
Right.
construction follows?
Right.
So don't you assume if construction was issued that zoning was also?
Good question, Jamal. Let me give
Excuse
you
me,
another
Ms. Smith,
example.
excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't
Okay.
want to interrupt you, but this is out of order of procedure. And while you will have plenty of opportunity to testify, these aren't questions. The last ones were brief and I let it go. You've claimed you're an attorney. We would love for our planner to have an opportunity to provide his testimony. So do you have specific
Okay,
questions?
I will pose these in the way of questions.
And two, if you object to that, that's fine.
Okay.
And Mr. Wolf, if you want to wait for some of the more planning testimony, that is more apt for the planner.
That's
So
fine.
if you want to please try to, and, counsel is correct, we are only cross-examining and public comment on this particular witness. Let's try to just curb it just a little bit for this.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was just following my predecessors, okay? But you're allowed to change the rules midstream, that's fine. You have construction permits, correct?
Correct.
You asked Mr. Johnston to provide you what he had, correct?
I didn't even ask him, he just came forward with me, as he was friends with the previous owner, and he was trying to help sell the property, because they actually, I think they moved out of state as well, so I never even met them.
So he gave you, as far as you know, he gave you what he had, correct?
I got several folders of everything from when he got electrical put into lights to garage doors to when he poured the concrete. I have every single thing, every receipt.
Perfect. So you're telling me he was a pack rat. He gave you several folders. In those folders, there was no zoning approval, correct?
There was just a construction permit that stated.
Thank you. So you would have thought, I assume, if he had a zoning approval, given that he was a pack rat and had folders of everything, right down to the concrete, the wiring, etc., he would have given it to you. You don't have it. No, I'm asking questions, sir.
You're asking the same question a second time to try to make a point.
Well, you're right, I am trying to make a point. But I thought that's the purpose here, but, okay.
Reiterate a point.
Okay, let's keep some decorum here.
The question's been answered.
Okay.
Okay.
You read in support of your position from a document, I believe it was Exhibit 23, you read a statement from the tax assessor, correct? You read the following statement. Rear of property looks like commercial use, landscaping, and then your lawyer reminded you the word CO followed landscaping. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Let's read the next sentence that follows that.
What exhibit is that?
Exhibit 23. Read the sentence, I believe it was Exhibit 23. Read the sentence that follows. Give us the second half of what was written.
In the interest of time, would you like to read it while I get the exhibit for Mr. Monahan?
Yes. Temporary use by previous owner until his building is completed. So let's read the whole thing now. Rear of property looks like commercial use, paren landscape company. Temporary use by previous owner until his building is completed. Fred Johnston in 2004 was the previous owner. Till his building is completed. So it sounds like the zoning officer is saying, yeah, it looks like commercial use, but temporary use by the previous owner until his building is completed.
Is it the tax assessor?
Yeah, that's the tax assessors, I believe it was Exhibit 23.
The 2004, right?
Yes, September 20. I couldn't tell whether it was a 4 or a 9. The heading says 4. I can't tell from the writing whether it's 4 or 9.
And
It
that
looked
is,
more like a 9 to me, but
we have a much earlier certificate of approval from the construction department with respect to the building permit. So that is the opinion of the construction department as opposed to a tax assessor.
I'm sorry, what exhibit are you referring to about the previous opinion?
The 1990,
You're referring
Counsel.
to a comment by a tax assessor.
No, you
We
referred to the
provided-
comment by the tax assessor. Just to be clear, I'm reading the entire comment, you only read half of it.
We don't know what that means. We provided let me get my exhibit
Well, if you
list.
don't know what it means, why did you introduce it into evidence?
Mr. Wolf.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
We, to be,
Seriously.
to be clear, this says the rear of the property looks like a commercial use. The relevance of this, to answer your question,
Okay,
in a certification of a prior nonconforming use is to show that the use was existing at earlier times dating far back. This is yet another piece of evidence showing that the use was acknowledged by a tax assessor and written down. I am unable to understand what she meant on lines 4, 5, and 6, especially given its inconsistency with a certificate of approval for the pole barn indicating it was ready for occupancy that was issued, I believe, many years earlier. It was issued in what we decided it was the same month as the building permit, February of 1990.
well,
So is
I'll
this
come-
after the property was sold? Is she referring to the fact that Mr. Johnson was, prior owner was using it?
This is a passing reference in a 2004 tax assessor's card that includes an acknowledgement that the landscaping business was existing at that time.
look, my only point is you read the part that supports your position. The part that doesn't support your position, you didn't read.
So to be clear, if everyone would like to look at this together, and since I'm somewhat being attacked here,
I'm not
I'll take a
attacking, I'm
moment
asking
to.
Okay, Counsel, you can reread it, and then,
Okay,
Mr. Wolf, if you feel like your point has been made, we can move on.
that's fine.
Okay, so if you would like to look at Exhibit 3, you'll see in the comments. Yes, thank you, Robert. Exhibit 23, you'll see in the comments that it is lines. It's got lines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. We put this in front of you so you could see it with your own two eyes. Nothing was withheld. You were looking at it too. And Mr. Monahan drew your attention to lines 1 and 2, which is the first comment. There's then a space, and then there's two other comments made. There's comments on line 4, 5, 6, which look like one thought, and then there's comments on 8 and 9, which look like one thought. Again, you had this in front of you as well. Nothing was not produced to you or withheld. It's just the temporary use by the previous owner makes no sense because a building permit was issued. We pointed you to this solely for the purpose of its evidentiary value of demonstrating that yet another municipal official took note that the fact that the landscape business was there in 2004. That is solely the purpose for which this was offered.
Is more, Mr. Wolf? Keep it to just what he testified to, and I want to make sure we get, I don't know if we're going to get to the planner tonight, but.
I think in terms of the stuff that he testified to, just give me one moment.
And anything that you
Oh,
forget, you can always
yes,
ask in general
I
public
do-
comment to Mr.
I
Wolf.
do want to ask a couple more questions. The Exhibit 1, the application for zoning permit, can you put that in front of your client, please?
Make sure it's not sitting right here. They're out of order because I presented them in a different order, so.
Well, just by way of background, Exhibit 1 is the application that was filed by Mr. Moynihan with the zoning officer. This is the one that the zoning officer
Oh, it's right here.
rescinded, according to the testimony that was given earlier.
Is that it?
That's Exhibit 1. It's dated May 15th, 2023.
Correct.
That exhibit is filled out by hand, correct?
Correct.
It's handwritten, not typed.
Correct.
That's your handwriting?
The permit number and the date filed are Gail Ruiz, if I pronounced that right, she's the one that writes all that stuff. My handwriting is where it starts at owner and contractor information, and then it ends at the applicant's signature and the date.
So the stuff under township use only,
That's the township.
that's the township, and the stuff above name of contractor? Is that what you're asking, Rick?
Well, I'm trying to find, oh, the township, okay, I'm sorry, mine runs over on 2 pages, so I was a little confused. Okay, yes, I'm asking about the first page, the entire first page, and then I guess what you're saying is down to the signature line on the second page, you completed all of that except for the permit number and the date filed, correct?
Correct. So from the owners are on the same page. Owner and contractor information, from there all the way to the applicant's signature is mine.
You completed the whole first page except those 2 items?
Except for permit number and the date filed. That is for the township
And
use.
then this here you finished, correct?
That-
That's all yours?
That is correct. Because
Okay.
the date of my signature is when I
So it's the
applied for it.
entire first page, except for permit number and date filed,
Yeah.
and then the second page down to the signature and the date. Okay? So, the box that was checked other, and the handwriting landscape business pre-existing, you wrote that, correct?
yes, that I was instructed to write that from Gail and Stephen. Because there was no line for a landscape business in the
Okay, this is your description, and in the back you signed that what you filled in here is correct, is true.
correct?
Okay, so you represented then to the zoning officer that this was a pre-existing landscaping business. That was your representation to the zoning officer.
That is what he told me based on the information that he was able to find and the information I provided to gain approval for this zoning permit.
You filled out on this form, pre-existing landscaping business. Anything that you're saying that he told you, again, is hearsay. We don't have the zoning officer here to back that up, so I'm just trying to get, you filled this out knowing it had to be filled out correctly.
Correct.
So you filled out pre-existing, or landscaping business pre-existing.
Correct.
Asked and answered.
Then I go to the description of the work. I will take the first sentence. Looking to store the trucks, equipment, tools, material for my landscaping business. You wrote that, correct?
That is correct.
You do not say in this description that you are looking to operate a landscaping business. You are looking to store trucks, equipment, tools, and material.
I said looking to store the trucks, equipment, tools, and material for my landscape business.
Right. I just read that.
Correct. So yes, I'm admitting that what
Right.
I wrote and I signed,
Right.
that was me.
You do not say in the description anywhere that you are looking to operate a landscaping business out of that property, correct?
Correct. It does not say that in this box.
Okay. So your zoning application, you represent, you have a pre-existing landscaping business, and you state merely that you are looking to store certain equipment, not that you are looking to operate a landscaping business, correct?
Mr. Wolf, we've established that.
It's asked and answered, and he already testified that the operations occur off-site.
Okay.
Do you have a follow-up to that, if you were getting to another point? I just didn't want to cut your thought off, but we did have that ask and answer.
No, I just have a couple more things for this part. I have other things I'd like to say, but they're not questions, so I'll wait till that appropriate time.
You can make comments so long as it's just involving Mr. Monahan's testimony tonight. You can comment too, as long as it's just regarding his testimony.
Okay, thank you.
later, too.
No, I know, Emily, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to,
Fair enough.
I'm at a disadvantage, I don't have an opportunity to prepare, I have to listen to the testimony and then take notes and try to, so, I'm trying to be efficient.
Fair enough.
Your attorney filed an application dated April 3rd, 2024. Are you familiar with that application?
Yes.
Did you read?
Oh, wait, the application date is, I don't believe that's a
Yeah, that
correct
was
date of the
additional
edits.
materials.
I have Ray, new application to planning board for certification of pre-existing
let me
lawfully
just-
permitted non-conforming use or application for use variance, and it's dated April 3rd, 2024, from the Voight Law
Okay.
LLC.
Just confirming, just give me a moment.
To
Let
East
me look
Amwell.
through it. So we had October was the appeal, November was response on completeness, and then January, okay, this is what I wanted to confirm to answer your question. So January was additional exhibits. Yes, that is correct. Then in April, we filed on behalf of Mr. Monahan, the application for the 2 additional points of relief under the municipal land use law. And then on June 3rd, we submitted additional exhibit.
Okay, so then we are clear that you filed this April 3rd, 2024 letter that I'm referring to, correct?
As I just stated.
Okay. Mr. Moynihan, did you read the letter before she filed it?
Yes.
Okay, could you go to page 7 of that letter, please? Okay. The letter starts by making a statement of fact. Oh, I'm sorry, not the letter. The heading basis for appeal.
Regarding this line of questioning, Mr. Monahan did not review the legal arguments. This was put before the board so that the planner and the engineer would have an opportunity to make comments. I don't understand this line of questioning, but it is not the evidence in the record.
Mr. Wolf did ask if he had the opportunity to review it, and the applicant didn't respond.
He
So-
said he did.
He did, okay, well then,
I
I'm
know,
sorry, I
but
missed that. I
if
was pulling the
he's-
document.
I mean, when I write, I just want to make sure it's understood that when I write my letters, Mr. Monahan doesn't necessarily see the final draft. This is a cover letter that is provided in order to orient the board professionals to the application as is usual and customary, and it's not the evidence that's been put before you. So with respect to the line of questioning, I just want to make sure it remains within bounds, because it would be entirely unfair and prejudicial for a line of professional reasoning provided to the board professionals so that they could write their reports would be used in any way to try to reach a conclusion about my client. I do not want my work used that way. It is not the purpose of this document. It is not what
when you
its
say
cover
about,
let-
when you
cover
say
letter
about your
does.
client, do you mean the evidence before this board? Because what you represent to the board is, the board may consider.
Certainly, of course, but he's provided testimony.
Yes, it's
So-
not testimony, but it is argument on behalf of your
It is
client.
argument that has been
Okay.
provided. That is correct.
Okay, with that, go ahead, Mr. Wolf, if it's still relevant.
Okay. I'm not going to question your client on legal arguments. I'm going to question your client on statement of facts, because if he read the letter, which he just said he did, and he saw something in the letter that he believed was incomplete or incorrect, I assume he would have raised that with you. So I'd like to read a sentence. It's the first sentence under basis for appeal. It says, Fred Johnston, a previous owner of the property, used the property to operate a landscaping and farming business and to store and maintain equipment used for both commercial and agricultural purposes. What is your support for that statement, Mr. Moynihan?
Or counsel, if you have an answer for that too.
Well, I'd like to hear from the witness before his lawyer. I'd like to hear from the witness what his support was for this statement.
But as counsel mentioned, this is also part of her legal argument. So if she has factual information that she relied upon, I think that's fair that she can provide that.
Everything I write is based upon the actual documents that are before me, and if there's a suggestion that anything else It's entirely inappropriate. Everything that I have written is summarizing the evidence that I have submitted, knowing that it is going to go through a proper hearing process and be reviewed by multiple professionals. So
Okay,
would you
then I'll
please,
pose-
but let him answer your question, please.
Can you ask me one more time?
I could read you the sentence again and ask you the question again.
Okay,
The
thank you.
sentence reads, Fred Johnston, the previous owner of the property, used the property to operate a landscaping and farming business and to store and maintain equipment used for commercial and agricultural purposes. I'd like to know what is the support for that statement.
That
I'm
is-
happy if you answer, or your lawyer answers, or both of you.
That's the exhibit 15, which we reviewed, and that's where it says in the description of work, it says 40 by 100 metal pole barn for use of landscape and farm business storage.
Okay, so let me ask questions about that. Exhibit 15 is the construction permit. Let me read again what you just read. Under description of work under the construction permit, and it appears in two places. 40 by 100 metal pole barn for use of landscape and farm business storage. Can you please show me where in that description of work it refers to operating a landscaping business? That's your support for your statement. You just told me that. Please show me where that, in that sentence, it says operating a landscaping business, or where in the construction permits that were granted in 1990, or the C of O in 1990, anywhere it says operating a landscaping business. Would you please show me that?
Mr. Monahan, earlier you testified with respect to the various aspects of your operation, and you described all of the services that you provided, correct?
Correct.
Do you provide any of those services to your clients on your own property?
No, it's strictly the storage of the equipment. All of the work that we do is done at the client's property, whether it's house, commercial area, it's all done on property that they own or are in charge of.
Right, but do you acknowledge that there are plenty of businesses out there that are actually active businesses that do not necessarily have their clients come to their property for the services?
I can't speak for any other business. All I can speak for is my business, and no clients come on this property at 35 Rosemont Ringos Road.
Right, but your business is multiple components, correct? It's not just mowing the lawns. Operating a business is a lot more than just mowing lawns, correct?
Yes, everything type of work that we do, I stated previously.
Right. For example, you service the equipment on your property, correct?
Yes, we service the equipment inside.
You park the equipment on your property, correct?
Yes.
Sometimes landscaping equipment is notorious for leaking oil, correct? Trucks are notorious for leaking oil, older trucks. Maybe not even older trucks.
All of my trucks, none of my trucks leak oil or equipment, as all of them are under warranty at the Ford dealership, and they all get, and none of them leak oil. We park in people's driveways. The last thing I want is an oil stain on someone's driveway that I have to fix.
Mr. Wolf, where are we going with this? Point of questioning.
I'm just trying to get the sense of where the support is for the notion, the statement that I read, that Fred Johnston used the property to operate a landscaping business and to store and maintain equipment. So far, the answer I got was the documents in 1990, they say nothing about operating a landscaping business. That's where I'm going with this.
Mr. Monahan.
It seems like that's your answer.
Mr.
Okay.
Monahan, we reviewed all of the documents that have been submitted in this application together, correct?
Correct.
And we had lengthy discussions when you first retained me, where you described to me the experience that you had with Mr. Johnston, correct?
Correct.
Did Mr. Johnston, through your reviewing the property at the time that you were looking to purchase it, as well as through your conversations with Mr. Johnston, was it your understanding that he had employees coming to the site?
Yes.
Was it your understanding that he had, that he was working on equipment inside the pole barn, servicing equipment inside the pole barn?
Yes.
And was it your understanding that he had provided to you all of the documentation that was required. In your belief, he provided to you the documentation of his approvals in 1990, which said that he could operate this business there. That was your understanding of what that documentation meant, correct?
Correct.
And then you consulted with the zoning officer who told you how to complete that form, correct?
Correct.
She's leading her witness because her witness nowhere said, when I asked where in the.
Mr. Wolf,
I
again,
think-
even if we were on cross-examination,
Aren't we on cross?
we are, but we're not in court, and while I see what you're doing with your cross and setting foundation, the formal rules of evidence do not apply.
Right, but they're not precluded, are they?
But they also don't apply,
And
okay?
and I could lead him on cross.
Yes.
Right, but then I can follow up and point out that you are leading
Yes.
your witness on cross and that I asked a question.
And
he
that's for the,
answered it,
and that's for the board to determine, right, and determine credibility when they're deciding this application.
Okay.
And to be clear, I was intending to efficiently assist with reiterating testimony already in the record for the sake of not using your time inefficiently.
Well, I'm not trying to use anybody's time inefficiently either. I'm really just trying to get to the truth, that's all. Further down in the letter, it says, Mr. Moynihan obtained a zoning permit acknowledging the landscaping business on May 15th, 2023. Can you show me where that zoning permit is, which exhibit where it acknowledges the landscaping business?
The last page of exhibit 1.
You can speak.
Mr. Wolf, are you making this, you're making a distinction between storing equipment and operating a business?
Well, I'm actually just trying to get the facts.
I'm asking a question though, is that the facts you're trying to establish?
Well, I'm just trying to establish facts. I'm trying to establish whether I'm missing something here. Because I
Mr.
can't-
Moynihan, a question. Who wrote landscape business, $75 on the top of this?
That was either Gail or Steven. That's all my permits that I received, fence or the wall, all have that along with the price. I think it's how they use them to store them in their files.
Well, what
Go ahead,
doc-
Mr. Wolf.
Okay, it says, receive documentation showing that a landscaping business was granted permission to operate, along with a permit for a pole barn to store landscaping equipment and materials. What documentation? So far, I haven't seen any documentation that approved the operation of a landscaping business.
Mr. Monahan can't testify with respect to where Mr. Wozniak got his information, nor whether or not he might have a document that's relevant. He can't testify as to the comments made by Mr.
So we have
Wozniak.
just to be clear, we have no documentation in the record whatsoever that Mr. Johnston received approval to operate a landscaping business.
Are you asking if we have any evidence that he received that
No,
approval? Or are you
please
asking
listen
if
to my
there's?
question
I
carefully.
did listen to it carefully, and
No, you didn't. I didn't ask you, do you have any evidence? I asked you,
if we had
do you have any
documentation. in
One at a
terms-
time.
In terms of documentation, that is different than an actual zoning permit. Documentation referencing a zoning permit has already been described.
So are you telling me you have no documentation in the record that shows approval in 1990 of operating a landscaping business on the property?
Asked and answered.
The answer was no, correct?
Asked and answered. I explained to you.
She's being
already-
evasive. She
No,
doesn't want to
I-
answer it because
I'm-
she doesn't like the answer that she's going to have to give me, but in any
She
case-
has provided testimony regarding, and she has admitted there is not a zoning permit
That is correct.
issued, and they have
But I
admitted
don't-
that, right, if that's what you're looking for. But there is evidence that the applicant is relying upon in the alternative of that. And whether the board wants to take that and make a determination, they can. It's up to the board.
And
But
it's
we
not-
understand the fact you're trying to get on the record, Mr. Wolf.
Emily, I will tie all this together when the right time comes up before the public. I will wait till the right time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And it's not evasive, it is merely avoiding the tactic of trying to get us to say something so many times that it's what sticks in your head.
May I just ask by a show of hands, how many more people from the public want to ask questions? Francis, anyone else?
Just for Mr. Monahan, so
Just
this
for
is,
Mr. Monahan, okay.
we're getting to the other end of the time.
It's 10:30, we're getting to the, believe it or not, we all been sitting here. So what I'm going to propose that we do is allow Frances to ask her questions and then stop at that point and continue this to our next meeting.
Yeah, so close public, just to be
And then
clear.
we'll close the,
Close the public.
close the public, then,
And then allow council to present planning testimony. We'll go through this again for planner,
next meeting.
the next meeting. But at least we want to close public comment for this
Mr.
witness.
Public questioning.
Yeah, for this particular witness.
But then I would like to continue the meeting.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And continue it to
And then we'll
next month.
continue the rest till the next meeting.
But we want to make sure we get all the questioning of this witness done tonight.
And if there's a, yeah, okay.
Uh,
So that's it.
Excuse me, can I give you the packet I referred to when I was testifying?
Give it to Kristen, and Frances can come up and give her testimony and questioning.
No paperwork. I can limp over. Francis Gavigan, Worthsville Road.
Can you please raise your right hand?
Yes.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Kristen can confirm that I, several months ago, when it was a much thinner package, came in and reviewed the applications going back to 1990, et cetera, and the overviews. And if my recollection is correct, there was the 40 by 100 building, but the earlier images showed a overhang that was not the full length of the building. Is that correct?
Those were the carports that I mentioned earlier. In the back of the building with the silver top, those are the carports.
Okay. And later on, it showed the whole length, which was like 100 feet of it being covered. And I never saw any permit about that.
There was never, the full length of the back was never fully covered. So I'm not sure what photo you're
Okay.
regarding, but
Well, that's fine, and I'm not trying to keep anybody here or to be confrontational or anything like that. But one thing I did notice in the file was that there was a photo of like landscaping equipment, and there was a comment from an assessor who had been hired by the township saying that it looks like a landscaping business going on. I don't remember the exact
Yeah,
date.
we've discussed that.
And I asked Mary Ann Boucher, because she was here, what's the story with that? If it's been going on sort of under the radar for a long period of time and you get a comment like that, do you follow up? And the answer was no, they don't. It seems, the understanding that I acquired was that until you kick the hornet's nest and the neighbors come out with their tiki torches, everything can be down on the down and low. I also recall that original permit saying for the building that it was for farm equipment storage. I don't recall the landscaping, but I could be wrong in that regard.
For the permit or the tax
For the
assess?
permit.
Okay, so we're, I
And
just
it
wanna
was
make sure we're talking about
never,
different things.
there was nothing, anything on the tax assessors or anything about it being a landscaping. It's only since come up, since Mr. Monahan acquired the property. And unfortunately, what you were told and assumed may not have been as accurate as you might have hoped with a little more due diligence. And that might come back and bite you. I don't know. We're gonna get over all of this stuff. I'll be seeing you, Kristen, because there's no more stuff like that. But what I had noticed was there was a significant amount of expansion of the use over the series of aerials. And also that they'd gone into the 50-foot drainage swale easement, and I'm familiar with how sensitive the quality is of that branch of the Neshannock River and how sensitive everyone is about it from a 25-year-old case. Anyway, what I think doesn't matter, and I can do that when you present with your planner. But if you've got every scrap of evidence from Mr. Johnston, who was, as you just testified, assisting the owner in selling it, there might have been a more positive spin placed on whatever the status was, and that would have to be worked out. And I don't know if you went through the files or the construction files that are in West Amwell, rather than just asking Gail Brewy and whoever that is. I believe you do have a right to go there, sit there, and go through the construction files, and there might be some information that can either help you or hurt you. I don't know.
Francis, do you have any questions?
No, other than have you done it? And I get the answer is probably no, you just filed Oprah request. And we know how little information sometimes comes in an Oprah response, other than whatever. Anyway, let's all go home and do your homework. And it isn't easy doing stuff in East Amwell, but Scope Creek can bite you.
The scope of the Oprah request was for a complete copy of all of the records of the tax assessor, the construction department, as well as the zoning official.
Anyone else from the public? Okay. Without objection, I'm gonna close to the public. I don't know if I can need it, if I need a real motion. Okay, take a motion.
I've moved to close the public.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. So, it's 10:35 at night, and, we typically don't hear, any testimony after 10:30. So, as we discussed, we'll adjourn this to the next meeting, which is July 15th?
July 15th, so the,
Nope,
No, what is it?
You're not available?
I'm not available July.
So,
okay, then we'll just have to continue it again.
we'll continue it.
At the next meeting, we'll have to continue it at that next to go to August.
What is the date of that?
August 19th.
August 19th.
You need this?
Yeah, August 19th.
I'm in Maine.
September 16th.
I mean, we can discuss it. So
Why
what we
don't we
can,
discuss
yeah,
it?
what we can do is we can, we'll definitely continue it to July with the understanding that it'll probably be continued again. We can figure out if maybe we can do a special meeting. We'll talk about it, but
I appreciate that. I
We'll-
apologize.
we'll
that
see.
We have to request that,
but that's gonna be up to the board and the professionals and a lot. It's hard in the summertime, I get it, with availability and
Yeah.
vacations,
I'll
but
be 12 hours away. Otherwise, I would leave my kids and try to get here, but it's 12 hours.
I'm not leaving my kids to try and get here.
Mine are adults.
My grandkids aren't.
Yeah, I don't want
Okay, so
to,
we'll-
but I care about Mr. Monahan's application. So notice is carried to July.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we'll sort out if we can figure out a special meeting, if we can get the timing to work, we'll sort that.
Yeah.
We've tried in the past and.
yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Almost successful, so we'll
Okay.
do what we can.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. We have a few more pieces of business here. Not quite over here. Okay, so next up, invoices for approval. Has everyone
That's
had a
yours.
chance to look at the invoices
Yes.
in the files?
Yes.
May I have a motion?
I apologize.
please.
Emily?
Yeah.
I believe our class 1 and class 3 are in the small conference room and they wanted
You
to
can
be
bring them
retrieved.
back in
Oh,
if you
okay,
want.
yes, thank you, sorry about that. I'm like, it's 10:40.
Have they been playing
they're
poker?
probably sleeping.
Yeah.
They're sleeping. It's a long time to be sitting. Oh, no, oh,
Good
good,
night,
I got
good
everything
night.
off the chair. I can push back over again.
No, it's fine.
Welcome, Mike.
So now we're continuing as a planning board?
Yeah, that was the right thing to do.
Okay, so I guess we gotta stay.
No, you were fine. God, I'm sorry, I didn't take a break, it just didn't seem like
I know.
a good
There
time,
wasn't a
I
good
kept
time to take
thinking like,
Just power through it.
just power through.
There wasn't a good time to.
There really wasn't a good time. Are they still there? Are they asleep? Did you wake them up? Oh my God, look at.
Okay, so now I gotta squeeze them in.
Now, is Al retired? His retirement date.
Yeah, I thought he might already.
Or we can introduce it.
So they probably
Make sure you get it, and then we're gonna close. We can just mark it. It's fine. Go ahead, let's get this done.
Come on, Dante.
Wait.
Dante, where's Al Nardi?
He had to go out.
Okay, so we
But
can,
nobody got fooled, right?
what's that? What? What's happening?
Good night.
Mr. Kirschner. Mr. Kirschner. Yes. Let me let Dante make sure that it's peaceful out there.
Think Dante needs backup?
I think Dante's Okay, we are back. We have some quick business to take care of. Invoices for approval. Has everyone had a chance to look at them?
Yes.
May I have a motion to approve the invoices? There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 invoices. May I have a motion?
So moved?
So moved. Second, anybody?
Second.
All in favor? Did I not count right?
Well, Van Cleef Engineering doesn't have any.
Oh, my bad. Okay, yes, thank you. It's late. Do I get a pass on that one?
You get a
Okay.
pass on that one.
There are no items for discussion tonight. Are there any oral reports that have major updates that we need?
I wanted to give just one.
Okay.
thing. So, if folks are familiar with the state plan, the State Planning Commission's, now the DCA is gonna do it, is gonna be issuing a proposed state plan, and so municipalities will be getting, the opportunity to participate as what they call cross-acceptance, so, coming up on our campus, so it's a planning-related thing, because the state plan talks about important areas in the state, important uses, and for us also could mean monies, get tied to, things that are related to the state plan, so we'll have an opportunity to get notices and provide some input, so I'll keep you updated since this plan.
And I think I had a conversation with Mike that this time the state plan might have more teeth.
Yeah, we're waiting. So our office is actually working, we might be working with the counties, we haven't sorted it all out yet, but we're working with the counties to do the cross-acceptance work. It's definitely important, and I'm glad that you're talking about it, because I know a lot of towns are at the moment, so, it's something important to take note of. Don't know how receptive they will be to the feedback,
Right.
but it's important to at least give it.
I mean, what make our pitch. I went to a meeting that was held by the county planning department, and a couple of municipalities showed up, and I talked with some, neighboring municipalities about some significant interests. I mean, one that I mentioned in particular was the importance of the Saralins region, which, our municipality and other neighboring municipalities have, and so the county, took note of that. They said Somerset County also has an interest in that, so it's by way of things that can help us in our planning. It's one, even though, as you said, it's never had teeth before, but for funding, funding purposes from the state, it can do that. So thank you.
Anybody else?
From last month, there was discussion during the reports about the FOSBIC report from a consultant that went to the state, and FOSBIC had some edits, and we wanted to just make sure we follow up on that.
Yeah, so I'm actually working on it too, so I
Right.
can provide a quick update just of where the state's at. I bugged them about a month ago. They kind of didn't really give us much information. They said that they're anticipating that they will have it reviewed in 2 to 3 months. So not ideal. They're kind of just sitting on it. It's in a backlog at SADC, the Agricultural Committee. So just a waiting game for now, but I'd be glad to give you guys a card after this so that I could kind of get some of the feedback that you had.
I saw your email,
Oh,
right?
you
So
got
the,
it.
so the plan is that we're gonna wait for their comments before it goes out to Ag Advisory.
Yep.
And our public comment, just to see if, on the
It's
big
kind of-
issues about what are the priority preserved farms and whatnot,
Yeah.
if there's any comment from them before we, go out for our comments, right?
No, I totally, that's the better way of handling it. I just wanted to address if you guys had anything quick right now, we could look at it, but the best way is kind of get the comments from the state, and then kind of we can sort of rework the document from there. So, wish it was sooner, but it's in their court right now, so.
Okay.
Jamal, as you're saying, I mean, priorities for farmland acquisition, those are very important to us, so I'm glad we'll have an
And
opportunity
as in those, they
shine.
did indicate that they will not be like cutting off funding or anything, because they understand that they're the ones holding this up right now, so the funding opportunities are still gonna be available.
Thanks.
Anything else? May I have a motion to adjourn?
Open to the public.
Oh, I forgot. Sorry.
Sorry.
May I have a motion to open to the public?
Oh, we have public.
Yeah, we have public. So moved. May I have a second? All in favor? Anyone against?
Who seconded that?
Anybody from the public like to make a comment? Please, come.
Want to know when the ADAD zoning was implemented?
I would love to know.
It was March 25th, 1999. It's ordinance number 9906.
Tam, when was the flood? The flood that wiped out all the records down? You probably know that, Francis.
Maybe,
No, I'm not that old. It was before.
Floyd, would it have been Floyd?
495.
Floyd brought a lot of water.
That was fall of '99.
Because they're just talking
Floyd was
about
99.
how it.
Let's not talk about that, like,
Yeah,
other than
they're
that.
not actually here.
Yeah,
I
talk about
wanted to hear
everything.
that.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah, let's cut it off.
All right.
You're right. Thank you. Thank you. May I have a motion to close to the public?
Second?
All in favor? Aye. May I have a motion to adjourn? Anyone second? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
So, I talked to Ian. I know there's the one thing where the whole block is
So
on.
we have to get that ordinance.
That's definitely,
Yeah, that's why.
I got here for the adjournment.
To do that.
Yeah, what-